All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 2 of Let's Rank Stuff. I'm Henry Confidential, and that's Austin Pez Howell. We're going to rank stuff, and as you saw in the title, Quentin Tarantino movies. Episode 1 was Rocky, my favorite
Hey,
franchise, one of Austin's favorites. Now let's talk about one of our favorite directors, if not our number one. We'll probably talk about in further detail and get to the bottom of that. Austin, generally speaking, Tarantino, is he up there for you as terms of overall directors, working directors? Are you happy to talk about this, or was it like pulling teeth putting this list
yeah.
together?
Oh no, it wasn't pulling teeth at all. Come on, I love Tarantino. Although I will say, Henry, I came to Tarantino very late in my life, so to be as high up on my list of directors as he is, I can distinctly remember I didn't see my first Tarantino movie till probably late 2000s, maybe like 2007, 2008, and I was 20, 21 years old. I didn't see it till I started kind of blind buying DVDs and put it together like my physical media collection. So I, like a lot of people, started at the beginning, much like I did with Kevin Smith. If you go in Kevin Smith, you start with Clerks, right?
Yeah.
And if you go with Tarantino, you start with Reservoir Dogs. So I blind bought Reservoir Dogs. Heard a lot about it. I had seen pieces of it. Obviously, like many people, I was aware that there was a torture scene involving Michael Madsen in an ear, and so I was interested to see the rest of the movie, and knew there was a lot of yelling and screaming at each other. And yeah, I watched it, loved it, and immediately blind bought Pulp Fiction, which I had never seen. Again, pieces of here and there. I was aware of certain things. Everybody kind of knows the Sam Jackson, Ezekiel speech, things
Yeah.
like that from the movie, but you don't know it in context until you see the movie. But yeah, I came to it very late, and he quickly became one of my favorites. And I believe, if I recall, my first actual theatrical experience. I don't know about you. I'll get your background on Tarantino in a second, but my first theatrical Tarantino was, I believe, Inglorious Bastards, because I came to the director so late. So that was the first one I got to see in a theater.
For me, Tarantino, as you can see the background, the yellow and the red, Kill Bill, big influence in me in my life. That's
Hmm.
my number one first experience with Tarantino.
Hmm.
So definitely have a soft spot there with all the action and the gore and all that stuff.
Hmm.
I actually didn't get into the rest of his films post that until when I really got into film in the about the 2013 2014 range. So similar to
Hmm.
you, it's like late in life, or I mean, I guess technically for me, early in my taking film seriously, mode. But he was one of the
Hmm.
ones that attached me immediately, and my first actual theater experience was The Hateful Eight. So that late for me and
Wow,
Tarantino
yeah,
getting
really
together.
late.
So I'd
Yeah.
seen at that point when I'd seen at the Hateful Eight in the theaters in early 2016, because it had the release in 2015, and then I saw that and The Revenant around the same time in January 2016.
Mm.
Um, at that point, I was a huge Tarantino fan, so I went in with high expectations, and it was one of those where I knew what I liked, and all the other films I'd
Mhm.
seen them multiple times. So, that, and then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood were actually the only two that I've seen in theater. So it's definitely interesting
Yeah.
to the dynamic between theater and a home experience with Tarantino. But I guess we'll talk about
I
each
have
one
to make
individually.
one amend. One amend. I think I remember. I guess Death Proof was technically my first, because I do remember distinctly seeing the Grindhouse double feature in the two
Okay.
weeks it was available. So I did see that. But at the time, I was a bigger Robert Rodriguez fan, because I was a huge From Dusk Till Dawn fan.
Okay.
But I don't know if at the time I knew Tarantino was in it, obviously, as one of the brothers, but I don't think at the time I knew that he had co wrote it, and that was like one of his early scripts.
Yeah.
And I hadn't yet seen True Romance or Natural Born Killers. So technically, I guess Death Proof was my first theatrical, but I was really going at the time for Rodriguez and Planet Terror. So that was like kind of my end. So yeah, I
Sometimes how
did
it
stick
goes.
around for Death
You
Proof.
fall in love with someone, or
Yeah.
you retroactively
Mm-hmm.
realize that you are a fan of that person after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
even though you went in for a different reason. So without further ado, let's go to the list. On my personal list, I'm counting Kill Bill as one movie, just because
I
regardless
will
of
too. I will too. And we amended that because I thought about it, the context, and I was like, oh, he's about to do his 10th movie. So, and when I counted him up, I was like, oh yeah, well, I guess he counts Kill Bill as one movie. So it didn't really affect my rankings. Like
yeah,
both
yeah,
Kill
that
Bills,
we
wherever
talked
they
about that
are in my
privately. There next to
rankings,
each other.
are
Yeah.
right next to each other. So yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, that's how it's always
Yeah, it
been for
makes no
me.
difference.
So I'm gonna start for me, and my number
Mm-hmm.
nine is the reason this one's my number 9 is because I have one major flaw with it, and it's not as
Mm.
rewatchable given the length, and that is the aforementioned The Hateful Eight. Um,
Mm.
the reason I have this at number 9 at the bottom spot is after I've rewatched all of his films for many times for studying for trivia or just for my own personal things, I realized that this is the only one that I have an issue with, and my issue is that the third act reveal is, when you get into the Jody storyline, and when they're going into Daisy
Mm.
Gamargoo's their plan to like do it. It does a screeching halt, which it similarly does that in Once Upon a Time Hollywood with the narration. But for some reason Hollywood it works a little bit better. But in The Hateful Eight, it kind of it affects the pacing because you're about to go into the Tarantino action scene after the fact. So it goes to a screeching halt because it like you're it's like a play up to that point where it's beat by beat, like, as if, you're going down a conveyor belt of scene by scene, and then this one it completely switches, and it's like over 2 hours in, so it's just weird, and I don't know, it affects it for me. And then it sounds like a nitpick, but I feel like it's a very important plot point. Is Samuel Jackson, Major Warren, he mentions that Bob, he's confused that Bob is there because Minnie
Mm.
has two signs: no hats and no Mexicans. And it would be one
Yeah.
thing if Damien Bashir's character in that scene, in the flashback scene, had an American accent or a regular accent, but he speaks like how he does as Bob with his, Latino Mexican type accent. And it's one of those where it just is weird to me because Minnie is, accepting of him. So for that to be a major like ticking point for Marquise Warren to like think that Bob's up to no good, and then when we go to the flashback and we actually see him interact with Minnie, that there's no issues there. It's just weird. I feel like it's something that slipped through the
Well,
cracks and just it's
in the
never made sense to me.
flashback, and to address your points, because I've seen the Hateful Eight probably 30 or 40 times, so
A lot of
it's going to be
hours.
a very it's going to be much higher than than yours. I won't reveal where, but it's much higher for me. In the actual flashback with Channing Tatum, he barely interacts with Minnie, and I mean almost none. When she says, "Let's take off some hats, let's hear some names," he just goes, "Bub," and it's very generic. So at that point, I don't think she knows his background. And then at that point, he goes off and watches the chess game, does not say a word to her, while Jody is the one distracting her, asking her to roll cigarettes, asking her, how long she's run the place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Barely has any time. They're only in there about 5 minutes before they blow the place to hell. So she wouldn't have had time, anyways, to kick them out. If you go back and watch, like
Yeah,
literally, it's about 5 6 minutes before they start killing everybody. So it wouldn't have mattered anyways because they were going to kill them regardless. So I mean, it's like they probably didn't know the rules again because it might have been the first time they were there. It might not have been. Jody might have known more than the rest of the gang about the place. But yeah, we're getting into nitpicky stuff. But to me, I don't mind the reveal because we've gone this whole movie, all of a sudden dude gets shot out of nowhere from the basement, and you're like, wait a minute, who's in the basement? And to go back and go, oh wow, I heard Channing Tatum was in this movie, there he is. And
yeah,
it's like, okay. And I don't mind the reveal that like there's this other dynamic of he's been there the entire time. It's kind of it's a little bit of a twist. And then I actually don't mind the background because that's where we kind of figure out, and all the revelations are coming out anyway, so I don't necessarily mind it at that point because it's all coming to a head anyways. But that's just my perspective on it. I realize that some people might not be as into it
yeah.
as I
So
am.
yeah,
But yeah,
like
that's
like
fine.
like I said,
Mm.
Tarantino being one of my favorite directors, and spoiler alert, The Hateful Eight is the only 4-star movie on this list. The rest are 5-star movies for
Mm.
me. So that's not
Mm.
when you're nitpicking arguably your favorite director. It's really similar. If you
Right.
check out our last episode, our Rocky, any nitpick I have, it's not a negative in terms of the overall experience. It's just when you're doing rankings, you have to, distinguish the movies somehow, and that's the one that does it for me. So
Mm.
that is why it is my number 9. What's your number 9?
Well, I'm similar to you in that ranking, and we talked about this in our Rocky thing. Again, it's a similar situation with these Tarantino movies that we have our rankings, but just because something is nearer to the bottom does not necessarily mean I dislike the movie.
Right.
You know what I mean? I still
Eventually,
very
we'll have
much
a
enjoy
list
the
where the
movie,
bottom is the
or I
worst,
felt,
but
yeah,
as of right now, when it comes
is
to
the
like top
worst.
tier, yeah.
But yeah, it's just like it's more like my least favorite rather than my worst, if
Yep.
that makes sense. There's a distinct difference. Or the ones I go back to the least, or the ones I connect to the least. That
Exactly.
kind of connect me, mentally when I watch it. The ones that I'm least intrigued by. So, in having said that, my number 9 is his most recent film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And again, only because, yeah, we're gonna have radically different lists, I think, for this one. So, look, I've seen it probably 3 or 4 times since it came out. I saw it twice in the theater. I've seen it twice, I believe, at home. I rewatched it again recently for the Rank and Leo episode that we were on for Malcolm's show. To me, I really love the characters and the performances. There's some terrific scenes strung throughout it. I just have a problem with the lack of any kind of real story going on. It's just kind of a hangout movie over a course of mainly a day, which is fine because the Hateful Eight has a similar premise where you're just kind of hanging out with these characters. For whatever reason, I just connect to that story more than I do with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I just don't have the hard on that Tarantino has for 60s Hollywood. I just don't connect to that like at all. I have no love for 60s Hollywood is probably honestly the 60s are probably my least favorite decade of movies ever. I
Oh.
don't have that many favorite movies from that decade. I don't like if I were to look at my top 100, I may have like one movie from the 60s. Honestly, and if I have anything, they're like
I'm hoping
Clint
it's
Eastwood
it's the
westerns.
one, but yeah, well,
You know,
that's another time for another discussion.
well, it's like it's like 2001 Space Odyssey, or like for a few dollars more,
Oh,
stuff like that,
so no
or
Psycho.
stuff like Bonnie and Clyde. But no, Psycho is it's not in my top 100, but I do think it's one of the great horror movies of all time. I love Psycho.
That hurts.
So
I
yeah.
can't wait till we get into my episode. So make sure you're at this point if you're watching, please subscribe because at some
No,
point we're gonna do my top
I,
100
I I love
reveal and
Psycho.
it'll come
I
up.
love
But
Psycho. No, Psycho's great.
what
Hey, I
one
blew up
one
Psycho on the great horror movies of all time on the final episode of Malcolm's thing with the horror. I put it on the top 12 of all time.
There
I
you go.
pushed for that and I got it on there. So to be fair, I love Psycho.
There you go.
But back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Again, I just don't have that connection to that subject doesn't really intrigue me. Like it does Tarantino. I don't watch those old TV shows from the '60s. All that kind of stuff. Like to me, I just don't get invested in a lot of that stuff that's going on. If he had leaned more into the Manson stuff, I might have, because I do enjoy serial killer, kind of stuff, like exploring the minds of that. But it's not really a part of the movie. It's just kind of in the background, and you have to really get a lot of the references in this movie to really kind of pick up on things and enjoy it. But again, I like the characters. I like hanging out with these people, but it's the one I've gone back to the least and the one I have the least enthusiasm for. So, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is my number 9.
So yeah, I'll get into more depth. Similar to just how the show goes. When that's on mine, I'll talk about my thoughts on that. My number
Yeah.
8 is what I expected to be your number 9, and that's Death Proof.
Mm,
And the
okay.
reason that
Well, I mean, we can go ahead and talk about it because it's also my number 8. So it
there
knocks out both of them. We'll just go ahead and talk about it. But
you go.
I will say I rewatched Death Proof, and it bumped up from number 9 to number 8 on my most recent rewatch above Once Upon a Time. So I hadn't seen it in a while.
And I
Probably
and I
since that Grindhouse screening. Honestly,
and
probably
that
since then.
and privately, that's why I'm pretty sure I'm the one who told you that,
Mm,
because the reason it is my first 5-star, like I said, the rest of these movies for me personally are 5-star movies because
mm,
I love Tarantino's style, his approach to film, and although this technically feels the least Tarantino, it is a perfect imitation of what he's going for. Of
mm,
with just stuntman Mike just being a crazy psychopath, but also having a lot of charm. Kurt Russell does a fantastic job of being
mm,
intimidating and scary and creepy, but also like reeling you in, similar to what you're talking about, like with potentially what we could have gotten Charles Manson from him. So I feel like this is it that gives a little bit of a little peek through the curtain of what we could have gotten if he would have done a actual Charles Manson movie. But
Mhm.
something about this film it's so much fun. Like it's really short, so that obviously helps. But it does a good job of building up on these two different sets of girls, their friendships,
Mhm.
their camaraderie, the chemistry amongst them all, and then just the how you believe how they get associated and connected with Stuntman Mike. The first instance, they just happen to be at a bar. He's over there doing crazy stuff.
Mhm.
One girl that they don't like in the group, you know, is mean to them and all that stuff, and he picks her up because she starts to get drunk, blah blah blah, and then he does some damage,
Mhm.
and then he finds them, and it's kind of one of those. It's one of the most fun scenes that Tarantino's ever done. How it does the all four of the girls in the car dying in different segments
Yeah.
where each of their POV and their perspective for all of them, losing a leg,
Right.
going through the windshield and all that stuff,
I
and then
actually like even the scene before that even better when he pulls up to the intersection and asks which direction she's going, and she says
yeah,
she's going right, and he goes, well, man, that's just too bad, because if you were going left like I was, well, I'm gonna need you to really start getting scared right now. Like that's the part where I'm just like, oh man, Kurt Russell's so great in this
yeah.
movie. Like he's so fantastic. I can
Exactly,
just
and
turn it on. He's
and I think
awesome.
that's what a lot of people don't understand with this film is that they're either one going in for a Tarantino specific movie with heavy dialogue and all that stuff, or
Hmm.
two, they're just not familiar with the type of films that inspired the making of this, which is fine. Like oh man, Vanishing Point, the
Vanishing
movie.
Point
Yeah, the movie.
and Bullet
Where
and
the
all kinds of stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
the second segment where you really get into that and you're seeing like the car chase and the reason of why the white car is
Hmm.
just the Dodge Challenger is just so like impactful and why it means a lot to It's also fun seeing Zoe Bell get a chance to act in this because she was Uma Thurman's stunt
Hmm.
double in Kill Bill. So just seeing her actually be front and centered and be in the camera, and then she gets to be in Hateful Eight like we talked about a little bit ago. So that it's
Six Horse Judy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just one of those where it's the girls have a
Hello,
lot,
everybody. Welcome to Minnie's Haberdashery. No, she's
right?
great in that movie too.
Her New
She's so
Zealand accent.
spunky. I
There's
love her.
there's actually a
Oh
fun
yeah.
little line in Death Proof where she calls her Australian. It's like fuck you, I'm not Australian, I'm New Zealand, and,
Fuck you.
and
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
little
Don't
little
you
moments
dare
like
do
that.
that.
Yeah, little moments like that is why I feel like this
Yeah.
movie is super underrated. Obviously, it's number 9 or 8 for me, so it's not like it's the highest of the highest, but it's my first of the 5 stars because it's he's doing exactly what he's going for, and it's just a lot of fun. It's swiftly paced, and I have fun with it, and I'm
Well,
glad I
and
liked
you
it.
know what's also great about Kurt Russell's performance is how his turn and how he becomes kind of cowardly after they start
Yeah,
going after him. When they once they shoot him and start chasing after him, I'm sorry,
his
I
arms
was
all
just
broken
joking
and
around.
everything. Yeah,
I'm sorry. Like he becomes such a putz. Like he's never had anybody fight back or survive or whatever the case is, and these girls are just they're just ready to die to go get back at his
yep,
ass. You know what I mean? And it's kind of cool in that way. To me, yeah, it's only that low again because it's the first time I've rewatched it since then. I noticed something weird on this one that he tries to go for that. Uh, Grindhousey, like he's got the scratches and stuff on the
yeah,
film in like the first half
the
of the movie
editing.
and things
Yeah,
like that, but then when it jumps to the other one, it's like completely clean and modern, which kind of threw me off. I thought he went for that the whole movie, but he doesn't. I know he's going for something there, but I don't really know what he's going for or what he's trying to say with that. And I had misremembered, I should say, both of those groups being together at some point earlier in the movie. I didn't remember that it was two separate groups at separate times, and then they never really interacted with each other. So that was a little jarring too. Like I thought they started together and split
yeah,
up at
one
some point and
cohesive
went
thing.
separate
Yeah,
ways. Yeah, and I misremembered that too. But again, it had been a long time since I
I think
watched
the
it. But
reason that
yeah,
he does
I did enjoy it.
I think the reason that he does the different styles is to show the progression of like Grindhouse to like Grindhouse. It's the women are not as
Hmm.
dominant and powerful and impactful and stand up for themselves. Where in the second half, it's clean. It's the girls are badass. They're
Hmm.
not running down from a fight. And it's also
Well, it's the modern. They're not the damsel in distress. They're the
exactly.
modern,
And I
like
feel
we're
like
not going to
it's
take this shit.
yeah,
Like
that's the
the
twist.
victims, yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, in the '70s thing, it goes back to you had those revenge movies of the '70s, but the girl would have to go through hell at first, something like I Spit on Your Grave
Yeah.
or stuff like Last House on the Left, where the girls of the movie had to go through some kind of torturous psychological,
So instead of
experience.
doing
And
the
then
same character with that
but
arc,
they might get
split
revenge
it.
or they might not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's how those movies used to be. But yeah, I'm
So
saying, and the modern one is they're going after him, they're fighting back, they're kicking ass. That's probably what he's going for. I'm sure if I looked up some interviews, it's probably what he was going for. But yeah, like I can imagine that's what it was. But yeah, it's the same as you. It's number 8. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just it's not one I go back to a lot. But I very much enjoyed the rewatch. I sure did.
exactly, and like I told Austin, before he did this rewatch, just go in it with that mindset of it's not a Tarantino film. This is the imitate. This is the most imitation versus inspired by
Hmm.
Tarantino made films. So if you go in knowing that, do a little research of the films that he's trying to imitate
Hmm.
and remake essentially, and then I think you'll have a lot more fun with it. So if you're one of those people that consider this like a 2-star or lower, like a negative film, go in with that mindset and do a little research, and I promise you it'll go up at least a little bit. So that
Yeah, yeah,
since
yeah.
since that was my pick, we'll go over to your number 7.
Okay, we'll jump to me. My number 7, and again, not bad. I really like it. I just don't go back to it a lot, just because for whatever reason, have to be in the right mindset to watch it, and that's Inglorious Bastards.
That is my
So
number
Inglorious
7. I'm
Bastards
not
is
the
my
only
number 7.
one. Let's
Hey,
go.
okay, all right.
Oof.
So yeah,
I was nervous
yeah.
about that
Again,
one.
it's really good. No, no, it's really good. But I've only gone back to it maybe 4 or 5 times, since it came out. I saw it in the theater. Bought it on DVD recently on a Blu-ray, but it throws you off with how like it was. I think the marketing is what really hurt this one because they
Yeah, I thought it
thought
was
the
an
marketing really
action
centered
war movie.
on. Yeah, it centered. It tried the marketing
The
played
Bastards.
all the Brad Pitt, yeah, the bastard stuff, the Bear Jew, all that kind of stuff, like and a little bit of Christoph Waltz. You think he's going to be like the just this main antagonist they're going after or whatever, trying to get to him, that sort of thing. And it's really not that. I mean, you get those segments which are a lot of fun with Brad Pitt and the bastards, but the movie's much more kind of slowly paced and subdued. It has some other storylines they didn't allude to, and the undercover stuff, with Michael Fassbender and all that kind of stuff throughout the movie. And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, that opening scene with Christoph Waltz is one of the most brilliantly written and acted opening scenes ever in cinema. I mean, the whole thing is just the revelations, the slow revelations, the changing of the languages throughout it, how Christoph Waltz plays it, and then the way he kind of just eases his way into, the accusations and all that kind of stuff. And he knows everything. He's 10 steps ahead of everybody he talks to in the movie. That's the whole movie. He's 10 steps ahead of everyone. It's brilliant, and that stuff is great, and it's a great catcher. And then it kind of jumps to the bastards here and there, but then you have some awkward stuff like with the Mike Myers weird general cameo, which is just strange and kind of comes out of nowhere. Although I know that was a request of his. But yeah, I mean, it's a string of really great scenes. But to me, like I have to be in the right mind. I think it feels its length, which I
Yeah.
don't feel in some of his other movies, and it feels long. Like it feels like about 2 hours in, I'm kind of ready to get to whatever finale they're going to get to, especially with the movie theater and all that kind of stuff. I'm just ready to get there with some of these other ones. I want it to go longer as opposed to this one. I'm kind of ready for it to be over, which is why it ranks a little lower
So I think the
for me.
difference with like this one and like Pulp Fiction, which we'll get to later, where it goes to different like
Mm-hmm.
main character story beats, is the fact that this one
Mm-hmm.
bounces back and forth. So the different storylines and segments have different
Mm-hmm.
pacing. So it's not a flow. Whereas in Pulp Fiction, it's essentially 4 different stories told separately where they all connect. So the pacing is those
Mm-hmm.
stories of 30, 40-minute stories. So, you have long stretches to get used to that pacing. Whereas this one, they're about 15, 20 minutes until you bounce to the next one. But some 15s feel like 30s and
Well,
so and so
yeah,
and
you
so.
have the slow open, and then
Yeah.
it like jumps to Brad Pitt, and he's real peppy, and I want Moscow, blah, blah,
Yeah.
and they're interrogating generals, and they're beating
With the
their heads in, and they're
music and
shooting
you have
people
all
in
that stuff.
hallways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then it gets back to like the
Everything with
girl, I forget her name,
Shoshana and
just like
everything, it's so slow.
hanging posters, and
Yeah.
yeah, Daniel Bruhl, and everything's like much slower, and you're just like, okay, I kind of just want to get to the back to the bastards because that stuff is like really fun, but like not that stuff is bad with like Daniel Bruhl and Shoshana and all that, but you're just like, man, like this is just such a weird. Yeah, the pacing
Different.
is
Yeah.
just weird, and it's just it's so radically different that it throws you off, and you kind of just want to get back to the stuff that you're having a little more fun with.
Like obviously that character, that storyline is important for the finale
Mhm.
and where we ultimately end up.
Oh
So
yeah.
you obviously need to develop it and set it up. But I feel like in a 2-hour 20 movie, or however long this movie is, there's minimum half hour specifically just for that awkward relationship that's like
Mhm.
creepy and weird and forceful. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
everything. It's like I said, it's still a 5-star movie for me. So because I do love it, but like you said, you have to be in the mood for it. You have to be able to accept the fact that
Mhm.
it bounces back and forth for German, French, English. That and it's which
Mhm.
if you notice in my top 100 in the future, I'm not afraid to watch foreign films, but it's just I don't know. It's just something about this movie where it's like every time I want to put it up there because in the moment I'm having a blast, but when I'm separated from it,
Mhm.
I'm like it's just not the first thing I think of because I like you said I think of the highlights. I don't think of the film as a whole. So
Mhm.
it's my number 7.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Brad Pitt's one of my favorite actors, and this is a fun,
Mhm.
tremendous performance. But there's just something missing, and I just don't know what it is. And by missing, I just mean in terms of favorites, not good and bad, because it's
Yeah,
great.
no, I'm right there with you. Yeah, it's great. Like when you get to the finale, like when you get to the end of the movie, you're like, wow, that was a great movie. But like you're not, it's not one of the ones you pick up and pop in like you do with some of the other movies on this list. You know, like are ones that I put on in the background all the time, like some of the ones at the top of my list that you'll see. You know what I mean? That I can just easily just pop on, have a great time with, and bump back out. You know, yeah, Inglorious Bastards just isn't one of those movies for me of his.
Exactly. And that's a good segue because now we're going to go to a movie that you disagree with me, but the fact that I could just pop this movie on the background and just have so much fun with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Once
This
upon a
is
time, right? Okay,
this
yeah.
is a movie where because you don't have that true connection, it's not higher, but it's higher than the ones below it because I can just watch it. Like this is
Mm.
I'm gonna channel my inner John Roca right now, where it's if I could just pop in any moment. If it's on TV, I could just watch 20, 30 minutes. Like this is one of the few movies in history
Mhm.
where I literally could just watch a couple minutes and just not even think twice. I'm like, ooh, I love that scene, and then just walk out. This is one of those
Mhm.
movies I could do dishes while it's in the background, just listen to it because of the
Sure.
music, because of the chill vibe. I can pop in and see some action. I could pop in and see the chemistry of my two favorite actors, Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, like literally my 1-2. So it's like the fact that it's not my favorite movie of all time is saddening. Don't get me wrong, but there's just some there's a a spark and an energy that just brings like it's 2.5 hours long, and yes, the last 40 minutes is amazing. It's kinetic, it's fiery,
Mhm.
it gets you going, it gets you happy because of how it changes history. But even up to that point, you're just chilling, having a lot of fun. Plus, I say this all the time. Other than the one scene in Kill Bill that I'll get to later when we talk about it, that movie is this is the other time when Tarantino essentially directs a horror scene in the Spawn Ranch. It's so
Mhm.
tense and so well directed and so well acted of how you're just assuming that Bruce Dern's character is blind, his eyes are
Right.
out. Like
Right.
the way they set it up, there's so many
Yeah.
little things that they're playing chess with each other of who's gonna flinch because they're trying to recruit him or what is it, Pussy? She's trying to recruit him, and that's another fun '60s thing,
Mhm.
the James Bond thing. You got Pussy, but
Sure. Sure.
but it's just one of those where it's just there's so many things going on in this movie that's just so much fun, and obviously you have all the quote unquote trailer moments of all the J.K. Hills movies, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, all of his movies, and the trailers and the scenes when Al Pacino comes in there for a couple minutes and he's like, ooh, I watched it, a double feature, and bah, 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 bah. And it's just a lot of fun. You can literally pop in, the first 20 minutes, have fun, the middle, the very end, you're gonna love that. You know what I mean? So it's one of those where if I need a movie to go to bed to, this is one of the first ones I think of. If I want a movie where I don't need to pay attention, but I want to have some fun and have a little background and pop in every once in a while, it's that. And then just my two favorite actors. So it's higher for me than you, but still not the top echelon of Tarantino. So that that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is my
yeah. And
thought on it.
again, it's not that I dislike it. It just doesn't click with me like some of the other movies do. You know, it just doesn't hit those beats for me personally. But I do understand why people like it, which is one of those great things about movies. Is some people, will see a movie that maybe doesn't click with certain people, but like other people will see it and just go, I don't know, man. I'm just vibing with this. Like I just vibe with everything about this movie and like the hangout aspect, just these characters. Again, you just like being in this world with these characters, which is one of the reasons reasons I like something like The Hateful Eight so much. I just like being with these characters. Like I don't care how long it is. I just like hanging out with these people. There are these personalities, things like that. And yeah, I could totally understand that with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I mean, it does have a lot of fun stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love a lot of the Great Escape stuff where he's like doing Steve McQueen scenes are a lot of fun. Where they kind of insert him into the movie. The
They
Bruce
do a good
Lee
job.
Brad Pitt scene
If
is
I
really
hadn't
great.
actually seen The Great
Yeah.
Escape, I never would have known that. That's
Oh
just
yeah,
like
yeah,
not.
right.
That's not even close. It's fun. They do a good
Yeah,
job
yeah,
of
yeah.
that.
No, I mean that stuff's great, and like we've talked about on that Rankum scene, like the scene where he's actually doing that bit on the Western show where she says that's the greatest acting
Greatest
I've ever
actor of
seen.
all
Like
time.
it
Yep.
is one of Leo's greatest acting moments of all time. Like legit,
You
like it's a
really got to
really
channel
great
that.
scene,
Yeah.
and he's awesome.
And
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I,
So
and
it's
that and
great,
that
and
that's the one thing where I'll
I
fight
do like
back.
it.
That's the one thing where I'll fight back where you're like, there's not really, something to connect to, like the character. This is a movie about the concept of being washed, finding who you truly are, what makes you you, because even when you go back to the very end where Brad Pitt's character needs to essentially separate from Leo because he's getting married, he's over there doing movies now, he doesn't really need a
Mhm.
stunt double, and it's like who am
Right.
I? You know what I mean? And Leonardo DiCaprio having that midlife crisis of like, I'm a nobody. You know what I mean? He's over there
Mhm.
crying, going through, panic attacks, freaking out just because people are gonna forget him, or even the concept they're like, oh, how are they gonna recognize me? You know what I mean? And he's like, I don't want them to
Mhm.
recognize Jake Cahill. I want them to see, Dukake. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like he needs to be relevant, but honestly, sometimes just do a good job, and I feel like by the end he finds out that there's more to life than just being a somebody, than doing something.
Mhm.
And it's one of those little things of stepping
See,
in with the flamethrower, and he technically didn't save the
yeah,
day, but in his mind he felt like he did something. So it's
sure.
just the little moments.
Well, and me, I've become a big fan of like spaghetti westerns. I just wanted to see some of those spaghetti westerns he was over there doing. Like I wanted to see some of that stuff. You know what I mean?
That
Like I
would be
want
a
to
lot
see
of fun.
what kind of crazy westerns he went over there to do. Like I want to see I want to see scenes of that. Just because again, I've been on a big spaghetti western kick the last couple of years, and I picked up some more Arrow, Blu-ray, Sartana, and some of the Vengeance Trails movies. I've been on a kick with those lately. So I just wanted to see that. Like they talk about, oh, he went off to do spaghetti western. Oh, come on, let me see that. I want to see that. Come on, like let me see some of those scenes, like kind of like we saw earlier with like
Yeah.
the war movies and things. Like I want to see that stuff. But that's cool. Maybe someday he probably films some stuff. Knowing Tarantino, he films everything,
Yeah.
everything that comes in
Just
his brain
literally,
for
literally just
any of
just
these
release
things.
some short films. Probably after he releases his 10th movie, he'll literally just do a documentary, but it's not really a documentary. It's just all of his behind the scenes extra stuff. It's just a
Oh yeah,
montage of extra stuff that just
hmm
couldn't make the film. But let's do a little
yeah,
that would sounds very Tarantino.
sure.
So we now have
So
my
my number
yeah.
six, my number, yeah, yeah. Your number six was Once Upon a Time. My number six is Reservoir Dogs. Um, One that I hadn't seen, haven't been back to in a while. Rewatched it. Again, the movie's really good. I just don't put it in the upper echelon just because I like some of these movies better. And to me, again, I have to be in the right mood to watch Reservoir Dogs. I dig it. It's fun. And I like the contained atmosphere. I love all the character interactions. Everything that they do in that warehouse, like all the stuff between Harvey Keitel and Buscemi and Madsen and Chris Penn and everybody, like is dynamite. Like that stuff is awesome. Why this is hurting your brain because it's like
It
your number one or something.
it's
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Well, again, it with just like the Rocky thing, it doesn't mean I don't like it. I love Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs rocks.
apparently you
It's
know how to get
it's
these
just like
reactions out of me.
yeah, I know. I'm getting these reactions out of you by saying I love this movie and it's great.
Less than me.
I just love other movies more. Yeah, less than you. And that's the subjective nature of movies. But yeah, Reservoir Dogs is fantastic, and it's just I think he got a little more polished later. That's all it is, and I think he just did better movies later. Not to say that Reservoir Dogs is bad. It's one of the best debuts for a director ever. Reservoir. If Reservoir Dogs is your first movie, any director would be happy to have Reservoir Dogs as their first movie. I mean that's a
Most directors would
dynamite
be
killer
happy to
first
even
movie.
have that quality in their filmography, let alone their first. Like that's
Yeah,
that's how
right.
good it is.
Exactly. To come out guns blazing with something like Reservoir Dogs, and then to follow up with something like Pulp Fiction, like that's a heavy double dose. To actually live up to to the hype and the potential. We see that all the time where somebody has a great first movie and the second movie just doesn't quite hit the mark, and then the star power kind of goes, fades a little bit. But yeah, I mean, like Reservoir Dogs is really good. I had a lot of fun with it. It's just again not one of the ones I put on regularly. That's literally all it is. That's all. That's the only reason it's number six. That's
There
pretty
you
much
go.
it.
I'll save my thoughts for a couple of minutes from now. But to
For
kind
later.
of
Okay.
piggyback off what you just said, when you start off with Reservoir Dogs, and then when you follow up with Pulp Fiction, and then you come out with Jackie Brown, people
Mm,
are not going to give it the love that it deserves because they're expecting Pulp Fiction, and it's just not. It's the only
mm,
film that Tarantino adapted from a pre a
mm.
you know
Ron
thing,
Hubbard.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
the
Mm,
Rum
mm.
Diaries, and it's one of those where, by the way, that's my number five. That was kind of my segue. I don't know if you guys
It's
are
Jackie
picking.
Brown. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
yeah.
know the audience. I don't know if you're
Right.
picking up what I was putting down. I'm the
Sure,
Wachowskis.
sure,
I
sure.
need to paint the full, like, hey, this is what I'm saying. But
Right.
anyway, Jackie Brown's my number five because it's ironic that it's right in the middle for me because it's easily the one that I'm going to say like, yo, most underrated. But at the end of the day, it's still my
Hmm.
middle. But
Oh,
middle
agreed.
for me at this point, I don't want to give spoiler alerts to where my favorite movies lie, but you're gonna recognize a lot of these. I'm gonna talk about a lot of these, in the future. Let's just put it that way. So Jackie Brown is a
Hmm.
film that I've been on record saying is my hands down my favorite, not most underrated, but my favorite Samuel L. Jackson performance. I love him as
Mm.
Ordell Roby because he is just so menacing, crazy, charming. Like I feel like that is something Tarantino it just brings out the best in characters is for them to be sadistic, crazy, action filled, but also has so much
But
charm.
they're really
Yeah.
charismatic and
And
like charming, and yeah, you like them even though they may be. Well, that's the same thing with Reservoir Dogs. Michael Madsen is a psychopath in that movie, but at the same time, when he's doing his dance, like before he do the thing, like you kind of like. I kind of like this guy.
there's
Like he's pretty funny. And then, but he does something horrific. He slices his ear off. But then when he does, like he puts it up to his mouth, he goes, "Hey, hello, you hear that?"
yeah.
Like you kind of like that's funny. Like you like him at the same time, even though he just did something horrific. Then he goes right back to pouring gasoline on the guy. You're like, oh my god, this guy's a psychopath again. Like that's what's so great about some of these characters that he writes. Yeah,
Exactly.
definitely.
Tarantino does a good job of that, and also a lot of people forget that Robert De Niro's in this movie, and not because
Yeah,
he's
it's his
bad.
most subdued.
Yeah,
Like
he's just
yeah, just like it's just a
he's just a
strange role
character.
for him, but he's fine.
Like
Yeah,
like
yeah, he's
like
just a
if it
guy.
wasn't Robert De Niro as Lewis and it was just someone else's Lewis, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
man, that Lewis guy was a pretty good character. It's fun. But because it's Robert De Niro,
Mm-hmm.
you just don't think of that in the top 10 Robert De Niro performances or movies. So you just forget about it as a whole. And like it's really good. Like everything that between him and Melanie towards the end, when he shoots her, and it's just like
Get the fuck.
live
Let's go. God damn it. Go. Shut up. Shut up. Let's go. Just
you don't
he's
know
just
where
like
you
pulling her
parked,
along, and then just turns
Lewis.
around
You
and
don't
just
know where
shoots
you
her. And,
parked.
and he just shoots her. He's like he just gets to the point where he's like, you know what? Bang. Like shut up.
And then
Go away.
and then
And then
later
when they're
Samuel
in
Jackson's like,
the
you
car
couldn't have
is
just
just
hit
like,
her, and he's
yeah,
like, yeah, I probably could
yeah.
have. It's just
He's like, what happened to her? I shot her.
shot her.
You
He's
know,
like, you shot her? She all right? She
I
dead?
shot her. What do you mean you
Yeah.
shot her? You could have just hit the bitch, like just shot her, like you could have just
It's
smacked her around, like,
exactly. And that,
she was going off, and like it's such an opposite of like you watch Goodfellas or something or Casino, and then you see this movie, and you're like,
yep.
man, that's not the same person, but that's
Plus,
why
he
he's such
looks
a good actor
gross.
because like he
That
slides right into that.
mustache and the
Yeah,
hair, he
he's
looks
scummy and
greasy. And
skeevy
he
and
just
just
got
yeah
out of jail.
greasy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's so much fun. And then and obviously we haven't talked about it yet, but Pam Grier is Jackie Brown. Like she's just so
Hmm.
fierce, and it's one of those similar to what we were talking
Hmm.
about earlier, like just the inspirations of Tarantino in all of his films, the black exploitation like of the '70s. And it's one of those that
Hmm.
he came back to not black exploitation specifically, but the era of the '70s and his love for it in Death Proof. But he started it
Hmm.
off here in Jackie Brown and how he just had a love for this character of just a strong woman. And I feel like that's so
Hmm.
underrated in Tarantino's filmography, just the strong women presence. Even when we were talking about Glorious Bastards earlier, just the presence of Shoshana, just being how she grows. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
Tarantino, regardless of what, might have been a little bit behind the scenes on behind the sets of like Kill Bill and stuff with Uma Thurman, you know, who knows, the full story. We'll never know truly. You hear things, but
Mm.
character-wise and from Tarantino's writing, he does a fantastic job of writing strong women. And it's one of those where Jackie Brown, it's super underrated because when you think about like her arc in this movie of just, it's like why is she working for the shitty airline? It's like, she's been through some stuff,
Oh
but
yeah.
and then she does what she has to do. But once again, you love
But
her.
how smart she is. She plays all three sides and she's
Yep.
10 steps ahead of everybody, and you realize how low key smart. And when it reveals that she's playing Michael Keaton, with the DEA, she's playing Ordell. She's sort of playing Robert for Max Cherry, but not really. But she's actually on his side, like working with
She
him. But
likes
you don't
him,
know
but
that at
also you
first.
do what you got to do.
But yeah, but you also don't know because like the way she plays it again, if she's playing these other guys, is she playing him too? Is she just going to rip everybody off and like run off? Like you don't know again until the end, really, if she's playing everybody. And the way that whole thing reveals, and like it's not like an action packed, heist sequence, but it's just so like the way it develops, you're just mesmerized. Like when you finally get there and you kind of put all the puzzle pieces together, it's like if you got like a really good puzzle or something at home that you're like so close to finishing, and like that rush of like you're almost there and you're putting the pieces together. It's not a slam bang, action packed movie, but like it's so well written that by the time you get there, you don't need crazy action. Like you get, a few bits here and there, but you don't need that stuff to have thrills, to be a thriller, and to get the tension built up.
It's also
Like you don't
similar
need
to
all
what I
that.
talked about Death Proof, how it has the multiple angles of
Hmm.
the girls killing. That's
Yeah.
the final scene in the mall where it shows the two different
Hmm.
sides and the
The
perspectives
different
of Louis. Yeah,
perspectives.
it's
Yeah.
like it's one of those
Hmm.
things where like Tarantino, he has a distinct style that like people know, but there are some things that Tarantino does in his films and with the camera that like is super underrated. Like there's at least one moment in every movie where you're like, yo, that stands out, and I can't believe no one's talking about that. And this is the scene from this movie where it's like the way that they're able to like show that, and it has just that weird that music with the like dun 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 dun, but like not like Law and Order style of that. But I don't know. There's something. It's
All
weird. It's
right.
like
All right.
elevator mall music because I mean it's in the mall. Like it's smartly like set up, and it's like so like low key,
Hmm.
but like thrilling, like you said at the same time, but not like Ocean's 11 where it's like, how are we gonna do it? But kind of, you know what I mean? It's one of those where it's so
Kind
close,
of,
like it,
but they're
it's
not, robbing. It's not a crack team robbing a casino. It's literally just a switcheroo in a dressing room. Of
but
these
you
like
have to be like you
towels
said,
and
two
and
steps
some
ahead.
money.
Yep.
But you have to be a step ahead of everybody. And when you see just how it all plays together, and
Even
Forrest is
even the
able to
little
just
thing
walk
about like how
away,
she tries
it's
on the
great.
dress, she's getting the attention of the
Hmm.
girl in the store, so she has her alibi. And then when everything
Hmm.
goes, she runs and she ups and pays, and she leaves. So then when Max comes, like, oh, my wife forgot her bag. Boom, that's how you're able to
Hmm.
grab the. It's just so smart, like you said. It's just
Oh
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't read the Punch Rum Diaries. Punch, what is it? Punch.
Hmm.
Rum Punch. Jesus, I said Rum Diaries earlier. That's what was that
Yeah.
Johnny Depp movie? But
That's
Rum
that one
Punch.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But anyway, Rum Punch. I've never read it, so I don't know exactly how good of an adaptation it is, and like what's taken from, if it's beat for beat. I don't know, but with that said, what we get from Jackie Brown, it's super smart and it's super fun and super underrated. When I see people like have this as their clear
Yeah.
bottom tier Tarantino, it just blows my mind. I'm like, that's crazy. This
No,
movie
no,
is so
no.
great.
And I have it. I'll just go ahead and say I have it similarly ranked to you. You had it at what, 5? I have it at 4. So I mean,
Okay.
it's in my
Yeah.
upper half of, because yeah, and I think it's still, like you said, criminally underseen even for a Tarantino movie. Like people just for whatever reason, just kind of jump from talking about Pulp Fiction and just kind of start talking about Kill Bill or talk about Inglourious Bastard. Whatever it is. They just kind of
Because
jump
it's
around,
laid back.
and
Yeah.
Jackie Brown just gets lost. Yeah, it's not super ultra violent. It doesn't have like the crazy over the top personalities like some of the other movies, or the over the top like super big scenes. Like
Action.
you
Yeah.
think of when you think of Pulp Fiction, you think of like Sam Jackson's Ezekiel
Yelling all the
scenes,
time.
or
Yeah.
the needle in the heart.
Yeah.
All that kind of all the big scenes that get your adrenaline going. And like Jackie Brown doesn't necessarily have that. Not to say your heart rate isn't racing. It's just you're not having those adrenalized like thrills
Yep.
but it's those subtle things where you're just enjoying getting sucked into the story and getting kind of mesmerized by how well he's weaving the story together. Like that's the great thing about that
Which
movie.
isn't a testament to him as
So
a director
yeah,
that he's able to do that, because it's steering away from his well-known style and still directing a movie like
yeah,
essentially perfectly.
right.
So that is my number
So I
five.
spoiled a little bit that, yeah, I spoiled a little by just saying Jackie Brown was my number four because we were just talking about it so much. So I'll crank it back just a tad and go back to my number five is the Kill Bill saga, and that's my number five. So and yeah, and it's funny when I rewatched Kill Bill one because you had it as one of your things for the battleground. It's just one of those things where, of course, watched it and then I immediately like wanted to watch volume two, but I was like, oh, I gotta hold off because I can't conflate the two in my mind when I'm talking about them, but I had that itch, ever since then to watch it. So I did rewatch volume two, and yeah, like the whole thing, like most, I would say like 95% of the movies work for me. I like almost everything. There's like one sequence that kind of is one thing that kind of drags it down. I'm not an anime fan, like at all,
Okay.
and I'm sorry, but like I think the 15-minute Oren anime backstory is a just not interesting to me because
Okay.
as not an anime fan, and b unnecessary. I think the whole backstory is unnecessary, and I think it slows the movie to a crawl. And I'll make my argument for that.
Okay.
To me, I get everything I need to know about Oren from the dinner scene when she freaks out and slices dude's heads off and just says the thing about if you ever use or ever insult like my heritage, how she's like half Japanese or and
Right.
where like, and that's what they were pointing at, like if you ever do that, like you motherfuckers, if you ever do that, and
Bone
she
chilling
literally like has these
chills.
violent tendencies. Yeah, no, and that's great, and I get everything I need to know about that character from that scene. I don't need this extensive backstory to me, and it kills the pacing of the movie for me. Like I'm totally with the movie, I'm vibing with it. It opens up with the Vivica Fox stuff. Like it flashes back to her in the coma and getting her muscles back, doing her thing, and starting the revenge tour. And you're getting little flashes of other things here and there, and then it just kind of like to me just dead stops for that. And I just and I hear that in the whole bloody affair, if you actually see it in a theater, it's like 30 minutes long, and I'm like, oh my god, that sounds like agony to me. Like I can't to a 30-minute anime scene of a character that, to me, like it's an interesting character. I just don't need all that because we don't get all that stuff for Vivica Fox. We don't get all that kind of stuff for Michael Madsen. I don't understand why we need it for this character. We don't get all that stuff for Daryl Hannon's character. We just don't need something like that. To me, I think it just kills the pacing. So that's the only reason why Kill Bill doesn't rank higher and go up into something like number three, is because I think he spends Tarantino just takes one tangent too many here and there, but not to say that the highs of Kill Bill movies aren't extremely high. Like I think the scene at the with the crazy 88s is tremendous. It's an awesome scene. I love the stuff with Hattori Hanzo, like that whole sequence where she goes in and she's kind of being flirty. She knows who he is, and they're kind of just doing the sushi thing. It's a little slapstick comedy, and then she gets down to business. The score that's playing when he's making the sword is fantastic. All that stuff, like it scratches my itches that I look for in those types of movies. It's great. All the stuff in Volume Two with David Carradine as Bill, I think is dynamite. I think he's phenomenal in that movie.
Mhm.
In Volume Two, he's great. I think every line he delivers is electric. There's just some cares. Like I want a whole movie of just Bill. Like you know what I mean? Like it makes you want to see like a whole thing of just Bill, and it makes me wonder like how Tarantino, he's able to get these older actors and just give them this material that just makes you put their whole career in a whole new context. Like
Yeah.
it's tremendous. Yeah, and it's great. I love the drama of Volume Two, all the stuff with her getting buried alive, the stuff with Michael Madsen. Like everything works for me except for the anime thing, which is why it can't bump above number five for me. I just think it just totally kills the pacing of the movie for me. Like every single time I watch it, I hit the fast forward button like immediately. I just do. I can't do it. So, but to me, like I still really love Kill Bill, and I know you love Kill Bill a lot too.
Yeah.
Like I know
So
you really dig it.
so Kill Bill is my number three, and
Hmm.
like I said, it's both of them. Like so, like if I separate them, it would literally be 3-4, or you know what I mean. It's one of those where it's like I've never
Yeah.
had an issue like with 2. So like when I hear people's gripes with 2 of how it's slow or how it's not action packed, it's like
I don't feel it's slow at all. I
I
think the
just yeah,
pacing of two is actually even better than to me personally.
I
Better.
agree. I feel like everything that we Kill Bill Volume 2, it's one of those where you know you've already set up the world and what you're getting from the Kill Bill storyline and from the bride, Beatrix, how she's
Mhm.
on her revenge path, how you have the full fledged out backstory of the wedding and just everything, how you're building up the character. If she's actually
Mhm.
just trying to be a human being, and if you like, characters like Dexter or something like that, so for someone like that to actually attempt to be human and like be someone, and the fact that it's completely ripped away from them just because of the fact that they just want it away. It's literally she did nothing wrong in terms of like in Bill's eyes other than he left her, and the fact that he went to like
Mhm.
murder her and murder her entire new husband's family and friends and stuff. It's one of those where it's like he literally says the line, he's like, you think I'm sadistic, but that's me at my most masochistic. And it's like in his mind he does not understand.
Well, and I love the line later when she finally meets him in the house, and he's just like, "I may have gone a tad
Yeah.
overboard," and
And
she's like, "Overboard," and like just that's the way he sees it. It's just like, well, that's just what I would have done to anybody. So yeah, maybe I went
yeah.
overreacted just a little
And then
bit.
and then and then
It's
how
like,
he and then
in
tells the
his
story.
mind, overreacting is killing everybody and putting her in a coma. Yeah, well, that's
Exactly.
over or
Well,
thinking you
technically
killed her,
attempting to
basically.
kill
Yeah,
her, she just
right.
happened to be in a coma. But yes,
Yeah, basically killing. Yeah, she just
yeah.
happened to be alive.
While
Yeah,
pregnant, yeah. Also,
yeah,
that's important too. But
yeah, yeah. Right.
he tells a
Oh my
story
god.
about like the Superman of he's like what I like Clark Kent
Hmm.
because he's just trying to Superman is who he is. Clark Kent is
It's the disguise.
yeah, you know what I mean. It's like it's
Mhm.
it's not vice versa. Like that's who he's faking. Like you know what I mean. He's pretending to be Clark Kent, but it's like it's not even close. Like that who he truly is. And it's like that's who we are. Like as people, and it's a nice little analogy if you really think about like who you truly are is an evil person, a murderer, an assassin, however you want to look at it. And then everything with BB, it's just so heartbreaking. It's that when you see her reaction the very first time when she's trying to
Mhm.
hold it in but like can't, and then it's really ironic
Mhm.
that BB's first game that she does is like shoot her, and he's like, mommy, you're dead. And it's just like, oh god, if only she knew
Yeah.
of like what she's really doing. He's
Right.
like, I don't know if you knew this, BB, but the last time your mom saw you or slash was around you, she actually did get shot. So it's that's Tarantino right there, being crazy how he's able
Yeah.
to go with that writing. And it's just like, oh my god. It's so Kill Bill Volume 2 is just super underrated, and like I said, everything with Kill Bill Volume 1. Honestly, one might say it's the best action movie of the 2000s. You know, what I mean, I don't know, but it's
I guess one could make that argument, and depending on who's listening to that argument, you could win that argument, I guess. But
exactly.
go see our battleground match if you want some context on that. But yeah,
But Kill Bill
no,
Volume One
it
and
is.
Two, they're it's like I consider one movie
It's a
because it
really
tells a
great.
full
It's a really
story.
great 18 minutes of action out of an hour and 47-minute movie. Yeah, it's pretty good.
I ain't trying to hear it. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on Kill Bill. Why I think Kill Bill 2 is super underrated, and honestly, why I think 1 and 2 go together as one movie. So if you're one of those people who just love Kill Bill Volume 1 for the action and there's the concept of the bride, and consider Kill Bill Volume 2 long and slow, really just actually take a step back. Probably don't watch them back to back. Like let's just be honest. Go in, like separate by like a couple days, you know what I mean, and actually watch Kill Bill Volume 2 with one fresh in your mind, but with not having the concept of a 4 hour
Well,
movie
that's
because
what I did. I watched the volume one to get ready for our battleground, and it was like 3 4 weeks later, and I finally got a chance to watch volume two, and it plays beautifully, because you have all the great scenes in
exactly
the back of your head, you have the cliffhanger, all that kind of stuff, and you can just jump right into two. But again, because it has obviously significantly, there is some action, but significantly less action than volume one, a little bit slower pace, but not bad pacing, just a little bit more story and
yeah
just more kind of a character beats and things like that, and a little bit more exposition. But yeah, if you can spread that out and do that. But at the same token, Quentin, can we get the whole bloody affair on Blu-ray just at some point? At least
please
as an option.
please
Can we put it out there just to have it? I'd really really like that. Just and
yes, Austin,
to see what it looks looks like altogether.
Austin would love to see that extended anime scene. By the way, this last thing
Yeah,
I'll
I'd
touch.
love to see that 30 minutes of
It's the last thing I'll
anime.
touch, and then we'll
Yeah.
move on to your number three, or my number four
So
actually. But
yeah.
with that anime scene, the reason that I think it works is because the difference between everyone else is everyone else has a connection to Bill. Like Daryl Hannah's character, like she's essentially Bill's number one. Michael Madsen is his brother, and then Vernita Green. The dynamic that you have there is her daughter, which is the reveal, and then also the fact that the bride is Black Mamba, so they kind of have that back and forth. It's like, I should have been Black Mamba, bitch. You know what I mean? It's like there's something how
Yeah.
they have the rivalry. That's why you started off there, because the bride and Vernita
Hmm.
Green, like they have their own like specific rivalry, and then you follow up
Hmm.
with Daryl Hannah's character, because their rivalry is more of like jealousy, because the bride is with Bill, and then Daryl Hannah's character is essentially her number one, so that you have that rivalry. So when you go into Oren Ishii, it's like you need to really connect on what stands her out. Why is she a part of this group, other than the fact that she's just how is she truly ahead of this mafia, essentially, everything. So
See, but here's the thing. I never wondered that. You could take out the anime sequence, and like I never had that question. It's like when you get a prequel and they answer a question you didn't have in the first place. I didn't need that. Like I just kind of filled in the gaps in my head, which is what some movies do. They kind of give you bits and pieces. They give you what the character is essentially, and I just kind of put it together in my head. When we, this is long before obviously Solo, but it's just an example when you're introduced to Han Solo in A New Hope and you find out that he's done some smuggling, he's run some spices, he's done this, that, and the other, you kind of fill in that backstory in your head. You know that you just understand that him and Chewbacca, this weird dude, have been together a long time. Like I don't need all that stuff filled in. Like it's just like I can fill that into my head through the course of the remainder of the movie and kind of piece together like their story, and Indiana Jones or something where you can piece all that stuff together through little drop lines, little bits of exposition, the way he interacts with certain characters. To me, just I don't need that, but I understand if people like it. It all boils down to me. I have a bias. I don't like anime, so I just skip it every time,
and
and
that's
it just
fair.
doesn't. I just don't need it. I don't need
So
it. But that's my biases, and I'll
so
fully admit that.
So this will be my two questions for the audience here. Comment below who's right on the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood disagreement, and who's right on the Oren Ishii background in Kill Bill Volume 1 debate
Gotcha.
right there.
Is
So
it
comment
necessary or
below who
not?
you're
Yeah.
picking. Yeah. So comment below.
Right.
Pick both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to my number
Mm-hmm.
four. At this point, we're picking at hairs, because I would say my
It's
top.
like at
Yeah.
any given time you could probably switch them around, or any given
Well,
day, whatever you're in the mood for, some
my
sort of thing,
my
or
one,
kind
two,
of
three are set in
set in stone.
stone, but in terms of like my number
Okay.
four, I'm saying number four, so it's outside my top three. But like based on where it ranks, in my all-time personal heart, it could be close to three. But like my one, two, three are like my one, two, three. But like my number
Mm-hmm.
four, it's you know what I mean. It's one of those where it's like it could be 3.1 on some days. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. So
Sure.
with that said,
Sure. Sure. Sure.
it's Django Unchained, and
Mm-hmm.
the reason it's my number four is because it's just so goddamn fun. Like, holy
Yeah, it's
cow!
fun.
The the way that Quentin Tarantino is capable of making so much despicable acts, words, language, thoughts, mindsets, people likable and tolerable in a sense is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Like he does a fantastic job of building this world. If this world wasn't established, nothing that happens within this narrative would work, because it'll just come off as either campy or it'll come off as
Mm-hmm.
mean-spirited. But he creates this world. Like there's something about the fact that the reveal of Django at the very beginning, when he throws off that blanket and you just see all his
Mm-hmm.
lashes, you're like, let's redemption, let's go. Like you are on his
Yeah.
side. There is
Yeah.
nothing that
Mm-hmm.
you can get up to that point that is going to be worse than seeing that from your main character within the first couple
Mm-hmm.
seconds of meeting your main title character. Like there's something about
Yeah.
how smart that is, to because that's in normal movies, that's something you reveal like halfway through, where they're having a heart to heart
Mm-hmm.
and he takes off his shirt and the main character's like, oh wow, that's something about
Well, and they go
right
into
off the
like
bat.
an they go into an exposition dump about where he's been and
Yeah,
what his
like no, no,
experience.
no.
But you don't need that. everything you need
History.
to
We have
know about
history
that.
books.
He's ready to get out of there and go find something. You don't know
Yeah.
what he's going after at first, but you know he's like, this
His
is my
true
chance
motivation. Yeah.
to do something. Yeah, like you get everything you need to know, yeah, from that one motion. And even from that opening scene, you get everything you need to know about
Oh,
King
Schultz.
Schultz.
Yeah.
Like you know that he's the smartest guy in the room. Again, much like Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards, he's 10 steps ahead of everybody. He already knows exactly how every interaction is going to go down. He knows exactly what he's going to say, how he's going to say it, when he's going to say it, every action he's going to take. He's so calculated, but in such a breezy, fun way of just like, oh, gentlemen, I'd like to parlay with you,
What?
and it's just like parlay. What that mean?
Yeah.
Like
Speak
he's
English,
so
boy.
speaking, just I will acquire a bill of sale. Like all this kind of shit.
One of
He's
my
just
favorite
so great.
lines is you promise not to shoot me down like a dog in the street, like my man over there. Precisely. He like rubs it in.
Precisely.
He rubs it in. He's like, yes.
Before
I
I've had my day in
court.
court.
There's he's the most low key arrogant prickly person you'll ever like meet,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
which
yeah.
it comes full circle by the end with his
Sure.
dick measuring
Well,
contest with
he's
Leo.
so
Yeah,
yeah, he can't get over that, and it costs him his life
yeah,
eventually. So yeah, he does pay for it, yes. But up until then, you're so with him. You're
yeah.
just like, this guy is one of the greatest just people I've ever encountered in
The
a
only
movie. He's
real
so great.
criticism I hear about this movie is a lot of people say like, "Oh, it's just he's just doing the same character as Hans Landa." Like, I've
No, he's
never
not.
understood.
Oh
I've
no,
never,
no, no,
but
no, no, no,
but
he's
I've
not.
heard that on multiple occasions where people have said that. I'm like,
No,
I don't know what you guys are seeing. That it's not
no.
the different inflections in tone and voice, the character like mannerisms. There is nothing like, oh, that's a bingo. That maybe that's something King Schultz might have said. But if you have one line that might be similar, I've heard that. I'm telling you, I've heard that
No.
argument multiple times, and I
Here's
hate
the
it. It makes no
difference.
sense.
Hans Landa hides his intentions and what he's really up to. King Schultz will tell you straight out what he's doing
Yeah,
and what he's here for,
because he's that smart.
other than in the case where he shoots the sheriff because that's who he's after with the bounty.
Yeah,
But afterwards, he tells you exactly what's going to happen, what he's going to do, and he's not intending to, go under, get underhanded, whatever I'm trying to say, like try to get under you just because, like if you cooperate with him, he's perfectly civil and perfectly fine. It's
which
when
is why
if he
he
has
keeps
pushback.
Django around for the entire
Yeah,
time. He's essentially
right.
hired Django to be his number two because A, he needs him, and B, he's like, I see potential in you. You know what I mean? Like, he's a good person at
Hmm.
heart. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's the one scene with the dogs when they're I think D'Artagnan's the character where he's chewing them up and he's killing them and stuff, and he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
what?
yeah,
And
right.
then Leo just doesn't understand. He's like, why is he? You guys are here to buy
You'd pay
Mandingos.
$500 for a guy who couldn't push a broom, and he's just like, no, 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 we're not. Like, we're not going to do that. Like, he's so in character. He has to stop. He has to stop King from like doing something that pretty much could
Gives
give them
away.
away. Like
Yeah.
he has to, yeah, yeah. He has to stop him from doing that and be like, no, this person who's willing to pay $12,000 for a Mandingo fighter is not going to pay $500 for this nothing of a
Yeah,
person. Like,
exactly.
I'm not disparaging the person, but I mean, like, in context of the film,
Yeah.
just this nobody. Like, he's not going to. That character would not do that. So, and Django knows that.
And
Coming
that's
from
the
that.
difference
So,
between Django and Schultz is the fact that Django's like
hmm
been through all the rough stuff, that
hmm
he's got that rough edge, so he's able to put on that that facade like
yeah,
in the true dark moments, whereas Schultz shows his true colors of like being a real genuine person. And I love the dynamic between the two because it starts to come off as cocky. It's
hmm
Jamie Foxx doing Jamie Foxx stuff in the best way, because his character
hmm
starts to be one of my favorite lines is he's like, "You gonna let me dress myself," and he's in the blue, and then he's talking to
oh yeah.
the one slave girl. She's like, what do you do for your man? You hear I ain't no slave? You meant to dress like that?" It's just little
You
shit
mean
like
you're
that.
meant to dress like
It's so funny. Like, it's just
that?
little
No,
things. It's just
that
so
whole
much
scene where
fun.
it's just like, you mean we should treat them like white folks? No,
No,
not I didn't say
did not say
that. No,
that.
like Jimmy the mailboy. Jimmy the mailboy. Yeah, treat him like Jimmy. Treat him like
That and,
like
and those are little. Those are
it's
I'm
so
telling you,
quotable. It's
little
so
moments.
quotable.
and like the
Yeah.
the whole bag scene with them the bags and everything, and then Jonah Hill
Mhm.
just a random cameo just for fun, because who doesn't want to be in a
Yeah.
Tarantino movie? If you had to pick between never being in a Tarantino movie because you might not star, or being in a Tarantino for 5 minutes, you're picking that 5 minutes regardless of the paycheck.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I mean? It's one of those
Mhm.
where it's like, yes, of course, and it's just so much fun. Don Johnson's having a blast. I think at this point this is the first thing Don Johnson's been in a long time. This was not a resurgence, but you're definitely not seeing Don Johnson in Knives Out if it wasn't for this performance. And like you said
Right.
earlier,
Yeah. Yeah.
Django brings, I mean not Django, Tarantino brings out the random performances from these older actors, and like that's a beautiful one. And then and even this is Bruce Dern. He has his little, because he was the slave owner of Django before he sold him and
Yeah.
Brunhilde
Mhm.
at the time. And
Karukin, old man Karukin.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's one of those where it's like, it's just it's there's so much in this. And then Walton Goggins, without what this performance, Walton Goggins, honestly, I think him, and although Hateful Eight is my was my number 9, Walton Goggins is hilarious. Like you're not gonna see me go a day without saying cut my legs off and call me Shorty. You know what I mean? You guys having a bounty hunting picnic. You know what I mean? Like it's
Now,
so quotable. It's just
now
so much
y'all
fun.
got me talking politics. See, I was just trying to
Oh,
be. I was just trying to. No, I think I'll just lay back here and let this carriage rock me to sleep, and
exactly.
think of
So
all
the fact that
think of how privileged I am
And
with these
you can
girls.
tell the reason I bring that up though is like he's not playing the same character in Django is what he plays in the Hateful Eight. And
Mhm.
Tarantino does a fantastic job
Yeah.
of writing characters for actors, but distinguishing them. Honestly, as much
Mhm.
as, like, for example, I love Sam Jackson as Nick Fury, but Sam Jackson as Nick Fury is Sam Jackson doing Sam Jackson with an eye patch.
Mhm.
It's good. He does a fantastic job, but like Samuel Jackson in Django Unchained is million times different than Sam Jackson in Pulp Fiction, and
Oh yeah.
Sam Jackson in
Mhm.
The Hateful Eight, even. You know what I mean? Like
And Sam Jackson
Tarantino,
and Jackie Brown, completely different.
yes,
Yeah. Oh, of
Tarantino
course.
writes these characters
Mhm.
for the actors while distinguishing themselves from, you know what I mean, from their previous characters, and it's
Mhm.
so beautiful. Like honestly, the way that I would want to see Jamie Foxx in another Tarantino movie after like his performances, in one of the most recent movies. I won't say specifically what, but one of the most recent movies, and also something like Baby Driver. The fact that Jamie Foxx shows that he can do these big budget action movies and stuff. Put him in another Tarantino movie. I would love to. I mean, it would be so much fun. Like
Mhm.
Tarantino does a fantastic job of writing characters for actors and to just making them stand
Quick
out.
what if? Quick what if question.
The Will Smith thing.
Would you have liked to have seen Will Smith in this role? Because I think I would have. I think he could have. It's one of those interesting what ifs. Like if I
Okay.
think it would have been good for his career, honestly,
Yeah.
to do something bold like that and do something different. I think he could have used it at that point of his career. I think he would have knocked it out of the park. I think he would have been great.
So the difference
And it's
is
just,
I
yeah.
don't think this movie would have been as funny and charismatic, because Will Smith playing this character, he's gonna be like Pursuit of Happiness or 7 Pounds, Django. Like he's gonna have a lot of heart, fantastic acting. He's gonna bring it, but it's not going to be as memorable and as charismatic and as witty as what we got from Jamie Foxx. Because Jamie Foxx is Because think about it. Think about Jamie Foxx playing Django. You think about Jamie Foxx playing Django, like the same, like I said,
Hmm.
those two characters I just said in Baby Driver and in the most recent movie. Like Jamie Foxx is
Hmm.
doing Jamie Foxx, but there's a twist on it because you got Tarantino's writing and direction. Think of Will
Hmm.
Smith doing anything with you have Mike Lowry, you have Fresh Prince. Those type of like fun, or even like Independence Day. That's not what you want from like a Django, like a Slit. You know what I mean? There's something. It's just I don't know. There's something about it that I
Right,
don't. I
but
don't. So it would have been had to.
I also
It would
think
be
he
more
could have.
dramatic.
I also think he could have. I think with Tarantino's direction on the writing, though, I think he could have. I think it would have been something
I
different. I
think
think he
Will
could
Smith
have
has too
pulled it
much
off,
ego.
though.
I love Will Smith, but I think he has too much
Well,
ego
no,
to be like,
that's he has too much ego, which is why he didn't take the part.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's
Like
what I'm
I'm just
saying. That
saying, if he
I
had
just
put
don't. I
his
don't. I
if
don't
he
think
had
it would
put
have
his ego in
connected.
check, he didn't take the part because he felt like Django was second fiddle to King Schultz. But what
That's
he
so
didn't
stupid.
understand and realize is that like King Schultz is the boisterous presence of the movie, but
Yeah.
it's still Django's story, and Django comes front and center eventually and builds his confidence to where he becomes like the guy who's on the horse at the end doing twirls, triumphing over a burning house because he's fulfilled his quest. I mean, if he had sat down and just thought for a second and realized that it still is Django's story at the bottom. Yes, King Schultz is the boisterous presence of the film. He's got a lot of the great memorable lines. Yes, and it's Christoph Waltz doing Christoph Waltz, and we get that. But Django is the backbone of the film, and like I think if Will Smith had sat and realized that and put his ego in check, I think it could have been. I just saying. I would have at least liked to seen like a, sort of like we see bits of Eric Stoltz in
Yeah,
Back to the
Back to the
Future
Future.
just to
Yes,
see
I was
what it
thinking.
would have been in like. I would have liked to have seen like at least some screen test stuff to see how he would have played it, that sort of thing, and see if it, if there was any kind of potential there. Don't get me wrong, Jamie Foxx is great, and I'm glad. And the movie that we got is the movie we got, and it's awesome. Like I'm not saying that. I just think it's fun to ponder this stuff every now and then to see like
It is
could
definitely a
he have
fun
pulled
what
it
if,
off?
but
Would
like
he
I
have pulled
said,
it
you
off?
also got to think of like the time period, like where Will Smith was in his career. Like that's pre-concussion, post Pursuit of Happiness, post I Am Legend, even where he's trying to do more action based. But think of how serious,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? There's not as much charisma. It's all heart and emotion during this chunk of period of what he's doing. Or if you go somewhere like After
Mhm.
Earth, where it's a bomb, you know what I mean? Like nothing within this specific. I just don't think like.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong, in an alternate universe, yes, on paper, do I think it would work? But realistically speaking, if in 2011 or whenever they signed on to make the movie, if he would have done this, I just don't think it would have worked. Like, is it possible it could have worked? Absolutely, on paper. But like, I'm just realistically speaking, I just really
Well,
don't
it's a
think.
much bigger
Yeah.
and it's a much bigger what if than a much smaller role that could have been different, like the Bear Jew being Adam Sandler in Inglourious Bastards, which is a much smaller role. It just would have
Yes.
been more fun to see Adam Sandler come out of a tunnel with a baseball bat and smash somebody in the head, because that role is not a big role in the first place. It's a pretty silent role, anyways. But
If
like
that
it
would have
just
been
would
the
have been
case, that would be my
fun.
number one. Like, Inglourious Basterds
Yeah,
would easily be
right.
my
Like,
yes.
and
No
that's what it
doubt.
was supposed to be. It was supposed to be Adam Sandler coming out of that as the Jew, as the
We could
Bear
do a
Jew,
whole
which,
movie battleground or a whole eventually the war room when that
yeah.
starts off of like alternate castings of like Tarantino stuff because it's like
Yeah.
there's so many. So
Mm.
before we get to that because we could turn this to a roundtable eventually, but
It's a
we gotta
whole
stay
nother
on
topic.
topic.
Yeah, it's a whole nother topic. A whole
What
nother topic.
is that was my number 4. What is your number 3?
My number three is again one of the movies, the early ones, and it's still high up there. It's Pulp Fiction. So my number three is Pulp Fiction. Um, Pulp Fiction is again great, and it's my number three. But my one, two, three is like you, pretty set in stone. It's blank blank Pulp Fiction. So it's the way the stories. What's the problem?
Well,
You like
okay,
act like me putting
no,
it
no,
number
okay.
three is like a slide against the
Oh,
movie, like I ranked it
okay.
number
Like,
9.
so no. Here's the
Like,
thing. Here's the thing. I'll let you continue, but here's the thing.
yeah.
There, I don't obviously I don't hate any Tarantino movies, so let me preface that
Mhm,
before this statement. But with that said, the
mhm,
fact of clearly based on just the math, what your 1 and 2 are, regardless of the order, being ahead of Pulp Fiction and Pulp Fiction being number
yeah.
3, it's just a wild combination where it's like I get we all have
It's a
different
wild
tastes. Yeah.
combination, but again, when I rank stuff, much like my personal top 64, it's not about what I think is the greatest movie of all time. It's what my favorite of the movies are, and the
Well,
favorite ones I
and
go back to,
when we
the
do
ones I
my top
watch, the
64
ones
on
I
tournament
click
fights,
with.
we'll further this
Okay,
debate because I
yeah. Well,
I hate
it's
this, but yes,
again,
that's fair. It's fair. Gee, go
what?
ahead.
That's okay. That's the way I rank things,
I
and you're gonna
know.
have to get used to that. Which is
I
why this
know.
show is gonna be fun,
I know.
because
I
this is
know.
why the show is gonna be so much fun.
And that's
Because
why
I
we're going
rank
to
my
argue, and
personal
that's what's going to
favorites,
make us great.
and 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 you're gonna rank what you think is like the most quality movie. I'm gonna rank what I think is my favorite, and that's the way I'm gonna rank things.
And that's why I'm
So
so excited for future like broader topics because then it's going to get
yeah, yeah,
wild. With the smaller ones,
right, right, right.
there's no wrong answers really, but when we get broad, I
Yeah.
can't wait for that. Like that's going to be
Oh yeah, yeah,
hilarious. But
yeah.
until then,
So
talk about Pulp Fiction. As I find my
Pulp
marker
Fiction. I
lost
mean, well, I mean,
in my
realistically,
pocket the whole
like,
time.
yeah, what's there to say about Pulp Fiction that hasn't been said 8,000 times, by a million people? I mean, what can Pez really add to the argument of Pulp Fiction of why it's amazing? I mean, I'm almost like, Pulp Fiction is Pulp Fiction. I remember I'll just say when I saw it for the first time, again, I knew of scenes, in out of context. I knew of a lot of the Sam Jackson scenes. I knew that at some point, uh, Uma Thurman got a needle in her heart to jumpstart her from something. I, was familiar with Jackrabbit Slims. I'd seen pieces on TV. I'd seen pieces on the internet, things like that. I just hadn't put it together. So when I sat down to finally watch this movie and put the whole story together, like I was just taken on this journey, and it's a journey of this 2.5 hour journey that you're taken on to where you don't know where it's going, you don't know how everything connects, kind of until the last act or so, and when things happen in the movie, you're pretty shocked. I had no idea the stuff with Marcellus Wallace. Had no idea about that. That hadn't been spoiled for me. Knew nothing about that kind of stuff. Yeah, the stuff with the Gimp and all that kind of things. Knew nothing
Wild.
about that. Yeah, wild stuff. I didn't know Marvin got shot in the face and all that whole saga with the
Oh
wolf.
man, I
I
shot
didn't
Marvin
know
in the
about that
face.
stuff. It shot Marvin in the face. The wolf come in and Harvey Keitel being awesome. As he always is, and being one of the great like little sub characters of all time is the wolf.
A simple
I
please,
didn't know.
simple please. That's all I
Yeah,
ask.
it's simple. He pretty, yes, pretty please with a sugar on top. Clean the fucking car. No, it's so he's so smooth. It's great, but all that stuff. The stuff with Bruce Willis. Like I didn't even know necessarily going to the movie that Bruce Willis was in the movie or what his
Yeah.
story arc was. The whole boxing thing and where
Quick
all that
pause.
stuff ends
When
up.
did you see this? I mean, I know you said you were late to Tarantino train, so do you remember
No,
like
and again,
roughly?
it was after Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
It was around 2008.
Okay.
Because I remember I saw, like I said, I had to amend. I know I saw Death Proof in theater because I saw Grindhouse, and then I saw Reservoir Dogs, and then I blind bought and sat down and watched the DVD of Pulp Fiction. It's just, but I remember talking about it distinctively with one of my friends back in Florida, and just wanting to talk about this movie, wanting to have a forum to be like, oh my God, I can't, have you seen this movie, Pulp Fiction? And people are like, yeah, of course I've seen Pulp Fiction. I'm like, I just saw this movie, Pulp Fiction. It's amazing. Like I just wanted to talk
That,
about
that,
it.
that was gonna
And
be
it's one
my
of those
follow
things.
up. So at this point, it was a
Yeah.
pre-established like top tier movie. So would you obviously
Yes.
rankings aside, it
Yes.
lived up to the hype. Is fair to
Yeah.
say.
Oh, yeah. To me, it lived up to hype because it took me on this journey where I didn't know where it was going.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was kind of out of order. When John Travolta gets shot in the bathroom, I'm like, but wait, but now he's at the end, and now him and Jackson are having breakfast in the thing. Oh, wait a minute, it's the same diner. Holy shit! Like, and now
Yeah.
there's Pumpkin, there's Honey Bunny. Robbing the place. Like, oh my God, now we get this other perspective. Like, how it all comes together. You're just if you don't know that going in, you're just like, whoa, like the way he connected, like
Gives
everything
you a
is so
reason to
great. And then
rewatch it too. Like that's
yeah,
something that's important.
and then that's the thing is that like a week later, I went back and rewatched it again, and I'm like, oh, okay, so this is actually before this thing,
Yeah.
and then this scene actually, okay, so they're wearing the clothes in this scene that are different than the one in this scene. So
Mm-hmm.
and oh, now they're walking into the bar and they've got the dorky clothes on, so that's after the robbery. You know what I mean? You're just like you're piecing it all together, and it's just so much fun, and it was so revolutionary at the time, like the way he did it, and that's why people went back and watched it over and over again, and how he composes everything, and again the naturalistic we talk about it to death, but the naturalistic conversations, the tangents, but like they're all fun tangents, about the things they talk about, the $5 milkshakes and the uncomfortable silences and all all that
Stuff with
stuff, the
Lance, like
massaging of the
his drug
feet.
dealer. You know how he
Oh
said,
yeah, Eric Stoltz again. We just mentioned Eric Stoltz. Yeah, Eric
fun
Stoltz again is
fact.
the drug dealer. Yeah, and he's watching the Three Stooges, and I'm a huge Three Stooges fan. And he's watching Brideless Groom, which is a public domain short for the Three
He's
Stooges.
eating
And I'm like, yeah,
cereal, and he's like, I thought you told these fucking assholes never call you this late, and that's exactly what I'm telling
yeah,
this
right.
fucking asshole right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, yeah, so many great quotes, great chemistry between all the characters. Ving Rhames is just the baddest of the badasses. He's so
Yeah.
like he just comes in full
What
force
do
in
you
that
think
movie,
of
and
the
he's
devil
awesome.
theory? You know how the Band-Aid, like he's like
Oh,
it's
the soul, or it's like
yeah.
his soul in the briefcase, and I think it's just
It's fun to talk about. At least
it's fun to talk
the
about,
fact
but
that
I
that
think
could
it's just
exist.
yeah,
But
no, I mean, I like the fact that there are theories like that where people have put together the fact that there's the Band-Aid on the thing, and 666 is the combination to the
yeah,
lock, and it's got this glow to it, and all this stuff, and
is
he's
that
like,
what I
oh yeah,
think it
we
is?
happy,
Yeah,
yeah, is that what I think, like all that stuff where you can have fun with that, and it's a fun theory, and the fact that Tarantino's never really said what's in the briefcase, it's just the classic MacGuffin. It's what everybody's going for, and he's just said it is whatever you want it to be. It's whatever you want it to be, and any theory really makes sense. It could be some kind of gold. People have said it's the diamonds from Reservoir Dogs, trying to connect Reservoir Dogs, all the different stuff, like trying to
yep.
connect different things. It's all kinds of different stuff. So that's the fun thing about that movie is you can analyze piece. But people say that the girl who gets carjacked in Reservoir Dogs is the same girl that gets in the car accident at the intersection with Marcellus Wallace. It actually is the same actress. So like that's another connection where she's like, not again, and you go like, oh, Reservoir Dogs, oh, it's the same lady. Like
Damn
that
it.
sucks. And damn
Learn to
it,
drive, bitch.
I had a shitty day. And the fact, there's all kinds of these little connections that are always fun. But yeah, it was just an experience, and I'll never forget that experience I had that month or so when I was just diving into everything Pulp Fiction. I watched all the special features. I was listening to all the commentaries. I was digging up articles, reading old reviews. Just really trying to like analyze everything about Pulp Fiction. It's one of those movies that people have analyzed and have written essays about and written dissertations about. All kinds of stuff, examining every minute detail of Pulp Fiction. It's one of those movies you could definitely do with it. Again, I just haven't watched it as much as my first two, so which is why my first two are my first two, and the ones that
That's
I can just put on anytime and just have a great time. That's all. Pulp Fiction's great. It's
which
amazing.
okay, and I'm not gonna harp on it too much, but I will say
Hmm.
the fact that you haven't reached that point with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood yet, giving
Hmm.
those like that criteria is it's interesting because it's like that's the definition of what Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is for me of how I'm able to just put it on and just watch it.
Well, and I told you,
Like
I
yeah,
understand that. Like, I get it. Like, why you do that, why people do that. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. Maybe I
exactly.
will someday,
No, yeah,
and
yeah.
we might come back, 3, 4 years down the line, and maybe I say, hey, man, I watched this past year. I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood 5, 6 times. This year, I just put it on in the background and just had fun with it. I might get to that point.
So that
I'm just
that
not there
yeah,
yet, and
that's
it's
what I'm
also
saying.
a
Wasn't
recency
harp on
thing.
it. It's just an
So yeah,
interesting fact where it's like you have your 1-2s because of like
yeah.
rewatchability being a main like criteria. So I was
Hmm.
just like, that's interesting because that's why Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's higher
Hmm.
for me, not
Well, and
higher,
again,
but yeah.
why my number two movie of all time, or really my number one and two, my number two movie of all time is Tremors because I've seen it literally over 300 times, and that's not an exaggeration. It's like I just
I respect
watch
that.
it. It's a comfort movie. I can dig into that world and just be in the moment with the movie like that. So, that's it's really high for me. Rewatchability is just it's a big part for me. A movie that I can just put on and just be in that world with
Okay.
that character,
So
those
I
characters. That's
believe
that's
I
big for
believe
me.
you more than
Mhm.
Jacob Barber for that argument of the if I had the it's so pull the curtain back. So I'm doing my top 64 for you and Jordan's
Mhm.
show of my the tournament
Right.
fight. And I was like, yo, I'm obviously I can't force no one's hand, but I'm gonna bring it up like, hey, I want you guys to vote based on like impact and how you view this
Hmm.
movie as a whole, not of what you would rather watch today. But with that said, and you can carry this over to the
Hmm.
actual show of I truly believe that just how you think of movies as a whole, not just of
Hmm.
between A versus B, but just as a whole, millions and millions of movies. This is what your thought process is. That if you continue with that process, I will respect that because of like you said, your number two
Yeah.
movie and how your number one and two of Tarantino, where it's like I genuinely believe like that's your thing, and me and Jordan had a little conversation about that of like that's just
Hmm.
people's thought process. That's what makes it fun. I'm like, yeah, but when you think of like this movie versus this movie, if this one's exponentially better than this one, but this one's an hour and a half shorter, and that's your reasoning, that's lame. So as long as you genuinely
Well,
believe
it's
your
lame,
reasons,
but again, depending on the day where I am in my life and given the situation going on at the time, you could slap a DVD of Lawrence of Arabia in front of me and a DVD of Surf Ninjas in front of me, and I might pick up Surf Ninjas and watch Surf Ninjas. You know what I mean? But my argument would be is what am I going to have a better time with, honestly, at this moment? It's going to be Surf Ninjas. While I fully recognize that Lawrence of Arabia is the great David Lean epic that is the exponentially better movie, like I'm gonna pick up the DVD and
we
watch Surf Ninja.
we will continue this conversation in length later. But yes, it is started, and so my one and two at this point are obvious, and
So
my
all I'm saying is, I know you're getting their expectations high for tournament fights, but sometimes tournament fights just comes down to I'd rather watch Secret of the Ooze than 2001: A Space Odyssey right
and
now.
let's just put it
So
this
you know
way.
what?
I took
It is what it is.
Secret of the Ooze out of my top 64 for that reason. No, I'm just kidding. But so my one and two are obviously, if you've done the math and you're paying attention, my 1 and 2 are like
Yes.
the
Yeah.
whatever, however you want to claim it. So I want to go to your number 2 first, so we can go
Okay.
into like now with the top two. This is
Mm-hmm.
like the creme de la creme. Like for most people, when you
Mm-hmm.
have like 1, 2, they could be alternating of like my favorite. You know what I mean? Like they could switch back and forth. Which, fun fact, mine are next to each other on an important list in my life, and very
Mm-hmm.
high. Yours might be one. I don't know the day, so we'll get to your story. But my point is like let's
Mm-hmm.
truly get to like why these are your 1 and 2. Not just let's not talk about the movies.
Sure.
Let's talk about the impact and like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like why? What is your number 2, and why is that your number 2?
Okay, so Hateful Eight is my number two. And Hateful Eight, when I first, again, and but this goes into the context of what I'm going to get to. When I first saw it, I saw it with my ex. We watched it in the theater. It's obviously a 3 hour movie. It's a very long movie, but boy, did I just get sucked into this world like a vacuum, and like with these characters, to where like the whole movie it's obviously, much like Reservoir Dogs, one of his most contained movies, where it's pretty much a
Yeah,
one location movie. Well, I mean, other than them getting in the carriage to
yeah.
Minnie's haberdashery, but like
For the chunk of
essentially
the
the plot
movie,
takes place.
yes,
Yes, yeah, and the same thing with Reservoir Dogs. Like, yes, we see other things here and
flashbacks
there,
and whatever.
but it's
Yeah,
essentially in the warehouse. You know what I mean? That's where the crux of the movie takes
yeah.
place. But yeah, like the fact of what Tarantino is able to do with this movie and set up these characters and just spend time with them. Not so much them dishing exposition and dishing dialogue, but really getting to know each other. You get in the heads of every single one of these characters. They are all so different and dynamic, every single one of them, from Major Warren to the Hangman to Daisy Domergue to, Walton Goggins' character to Samuel Smithers, the general, to Tim. Well, and again, and then even in a context when you find out who
The
Tim Roth
reveals. Yeah.
really is, when you find out who Michael
Oswaldo,
Madsen really is, when
Oswaldo.
you find out
Yeah.
who Senor Bob really is, you know what I mean? Like, and it puts their performances and their characters in a whole nother context, and you see there are these layered performances where English Pete is trying to play. Oh my God! Now
Oswaldo
I'm having
Mowbray.
like brain
Yeah.
farts and everything. Yeah, I was swallowing Mowbray. Like I'm having brain farts now because I'm on the spot. But any other day, I could
Trust
spit
me.
off like every
Trust
line
me.
of this movie.
Yes. I,
But yeah,
I I'll never
um,
judge on that if I believe you mean it, and I
yeah,
do.
yeah. No, 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 no. Oswaldo Mowbray,
With that accent,
Oswaldo
Mowbray.
Mowbray. No,
You
he's so
squirmy little
delightful.
fucker.
Like, and it's just all the different little miniature interactions that each of these characters have. The blow up that the three initial guys have in the carriage over the politics. To Daisy, just being this bystander, just
Licking the
not
blood
buying
off her
any
face. She's
of and the fact that she knows that Warren is full of shit about the Lincoln letter from the
yeah.
beginning, and you know that later, like, and you go back and watch it again, you know all that, like, and Hangman Ruth is just so into like his way of thinking and his philosophy on life and his philosophy on justice, and Warren is just like, I'll shoot you in the back, I don't give a shit, like his job shouldn't be that hard, and it's like, and then they get there, and you don't know. Well, again, they set up this mystery of like you don't know who anybody is. You can't trust a single person. Ruth doesn't trust a single person, but he kind of has to trust Warren. But he kind of has to trust Walton Goggins. But he's kind of got to trust these people, sort of. But you've got this tension of the Civil War and all this stuff that it's just people in this haberdashery, and how he makes the tension just build and build and build and build to where like and it's not explosive of like people yelling at each other. It's just these subtle things, and you can feel that there's this powder keg and it's gonna blow up at some point. Something's gonna happen. How he uses the environment and cuts off, the different areas of the haberdashery, the small contained environment. He makes it feel like a giant city almost. How he shoots it. It's just everything about it just worked. The movie feels cold, like even the breaths of people, the blizzard that's going outside. You feel that cold, and it just adds to the tension because Ob doesn't want to go outside for the third time to throw guns in the
Fuck
damn
no.
outhouse because he's so pissed off, But like he's just this other guy that he's always in the background, but you don't think about him. But then he's part of the plot too, and like and just. And then when you finally get these reveals and you get these big performances and Warren. piecing everything together and putting together his theories, but you still don't know if he's right. He might be right, he might be wrong. He's just kind of guessing still. And then you get the shot through the door and you get Channing Tatum, you go, holy crap, he was there the whole time. Here we go. And there's a whole nother angle to this story. Like, if you have the patience for this, like if you can sit down and just be absorbed by a movie like this, this is really where I think Tarantino's writing, it just shows how much it can drive a story and how much his characters can drive a story that is not slam bang action beat, story beat, action beat, and slowly do all this, but in kind of an incognito way, in a background way, to where you don't even notice it almost,
Yeah.
and then how it just builds to me, and it builds this explosion.
One of
I
my
know not everybody joins me on that, and that's why I know Hateful Eight is a little lower on your list, and I understand that, but to me, it just works.
one of
It
my best
just
fun facts
works.
about
Everything
this
about it.
movie is when John Ruth smashes the guitar, and that's a real
Oh yeah, and it
guitar,
was a
and that
real
is
guitar. Yeah.
Jennifer Jason Leigh's genuine reaction. What do you do? Like
Mhm.
her
Oh
genuine
no! Oh my
shock.
god! Oh my
Yeah,
god! What? Stop it! No! No! Don't!
yeah.
Yeah, no.
That's
And
little things like
but it
that builds
works.
up.
But it works in the context of the story because he's also freaking out and he's going to re-handcuff her, and he had let her kind of roam around a little bit and he had uncuffed her at that point,
Because
and
of the
he
soup
like
scene or
freaks
the
out.
stew they were eating and they
Yes,
were
yes,
conflict.
the stew.
That's the one good thing
Because
about having a long movie like
yeah,
this. You have little moments like
hmm
that build up to a serious
well,
moment later.
and it works with the guitar, but it also works in the fact that he's recanting of it to herself, and she knows he's about to drink the coffee and he's going to die, and now she's going to be handcuffed to this
That's why
dude
that's why
instead of
she's
just being
talking shit
free.
too. She gets
That's right,
cocky.
exactly, exactly. But like it works in both ways, so
Yeah.
that's how well written the character. That's how in character those people were too, and it just works. And you think you're going to be with. It's also a change of perspective because you think you're going to be with Kurt Russell the whole
For the
time,
whole
but it
movie.
shifts to Warren and Walton Goggins. Like it shifts to them being like the focus of the movie and the fact that they have to get along and they have to form this
And it
uneasy
builds
alliance,
up
even
their
up to the end
relationship beforehand
with
really good.
tempting Mannix and trying to like
Join our
you
side,
don't even
yeah.
know
Yeah.
Mannix might join their side because you still don't know about this guy until the very end. Like you are left on pins and needles the whole movie not knowing where these guys, and the fact that you know these characters by this point because they've spent so much time with these characters and you are just with them I'm with them every step of the way. I understand that people who watch it are not everybody is, but I am, and it just works for me every single time I watch this movie. I've watched it so many times, it always sucks me in, it always works
And I think it's
for me
poetic
personally.
justice that by the end of the day that they do kill Daisy by hanging because of just the
Mm-hmm.
honor
Yes.
of John Ruth, because of there's an honor system and there's respect there where it's like
Mm-hmm.
we all disagree, we all have our differences. Marquise Warren being black, Chris
Mm-hmm.
Mannix being from the South, and then John Ruth being essentially a rival bounty hunter. Like they all have their differences, but at the end of the day, what's deep down and who they truly are, they have a respect. You know what I mean? Like think of like
Mm-hmm.
the scene with John Ruth and Warren when they talk about the Lincoln letter again, and he genuinely is like
Mm-hmm.
Mary Todd Colin. He's like they get Sweet Mary Todd. That gets me every time.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, it
There's
gets me every time
humanity.
too.
They all have
Well, even
moments.
there's even stuff with Mannix where you don't like him because he's a racist and he's very over the top with and he's not afraid to show that. But when him and Domergue are going back and forth and she's like, I got an army of it, he's like, no, we had an army. My daddy led an army that were convicted. They had their convictions. It was, 100. My daddy led a men of 5,000, however many thousand men. My daddy led a real army. You ain't nothing. You're
Yeah.
like you're nothing. I was something. We were something. We
And
made a
that's
difference. You're
also
you're just a person.
and
You know.
that also builds up the respect of just the war, like you said, the Civil War thing of
Mm-hmm.
eventually when
Yeah, yeah,
obviously Warren baits him later, but like the fact
yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
Smithers was willing to let Warren sit down in front of me. He's like, we showed a battlefield, I can
Right.
sit down.
We should have
The
battlefield with this
the
man.
fact that
Yeah,
I
no,
had
and
that
he starts
he was
talking to him.
yeah, the fact that he
Yeah.
was willing to give him the chance to bait him is
Mm-hmm.
because of the respect of the war and the politics and all that stuff. And
Right.
that's an ironic thing because in real life that doesn't happen. So the fact that in this film you show off that thing,
Mm-hmm.
it gives hope to like
Yeah.
moments like that of like
Yeah,
hey,
and that just looming in the background of the context of just being after the Civil War, tensions are still high. Like
yep,
even just having one person of one race and one person of another race. Like, it's still the Civil War. That was
That's
a
literally what
big
Smithers
thing,
said.
and
He's
like
like, "Do you
also
know him?
attention.
I don't know him. I just know
Yeah.
that he's him." You know what I mean? It's like,
He's him,
yeah,
yeah, and I don't need to know him. But then when he sits
exactly.
down, he's just like, "How you doing?" And he's just like, "Well, I can't complain. I got both my legs." Imagine what he's seen in the
Yeah.
battlefield. You know what I mean? I got both. I got my health. I got
It's
both
one
my
of
legs.
those
You know, I
chances
can't
where
complain too
if I
much.
don't see color, I can
Yeah,
actually talk to you like a person because you're the only one person that
yeah,
gets
yeah.
what I've been through. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah,
there's
we've
little,
both
yeah,
been through hell, even if it's a different hell, a different perspective, a different background, and that's just why, again, these little moments that I just love and I keep coming back to with this movie is just all these character moments, and it's just so like when you stop and realize like how well developed and well written this movie is, and like all those little pieces that come together, and just again for me, it's really rewatchable. I just like being at the haberdashery with these characters and seeing their interaction and how everything kind of plays out. Like it just works for me, man. I just really love Hateful Eight. I love it so much.
and I want to repeat this. This is one of those where it's
Mm,
like, if it's not Tarantino, if it's not Nolan, it's Tarantino. As terms of my favorite director, there's no
yeah.
secret about it. It's so fucking close. But with that said, my point is like a number 9 is not a negative thing. Like it's the only negative
No.
technically is the fact that it's the only 4-star of the 9 5-star movies. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like that's the only true
yeah, yeah.
negative about it. And the
Hmm.
only reason is like this is the only one where it genuinely feels length. It takes 5 minutes of opening credits of in the snow and like I said that transition. But like those aren't really negatives, but like if you're picking at hairs like so like I said I remember back in the day, like when this first came out, and just years since, like Caleb Cole was one of those where he's like, "This is like my Tarantino movie." And it's like I've never had any quorums about him. Like like it's granted it's
Hmm.
gone down on rewatch, but I've never disliked the movie. So anyone who talks positive, like I'm happy to talk about this. It's the fact that I'm
Yeah,
talking
no,
about
and
as
it's
much as
like
it's my number
you can
9.
hear the passion and how much I genuinely love this
Yeah,
movie. Like
and it's
it clicks with me. It just worked for me. I
nothing about
understand.
this
Again,
is
movies
offensive
are
because yeah,
subjectives. It doesn't work for everybody, and some people put it on the low tier, and that's fine. I have no problem. But I will tout this movie forever as one of my Tarantino movies. Like I just love this movie to pieces and everything about it. So, and that's
absolutely.
why I've watched it as many times
So
as I have.
for you all watching and write in the comments
Mhm.
where it is just specifically. I mean, obviously put your entire list of Tarantino, but if for some
Sure.
reason you're too lazy or you don't have the patience to write an entire list, at least write where the Hateful Eight is, since this is the most disparaged one on both of our lists. This
Yeah,
is his
I
number
think
2, and
so.
this is my number 9. This is the only one where it's like clear difference. So right where
Right,
you
right,
are on
right. Big
Hateful
time.
Eight, like just whose side are you on, Austin's or Henry's for Hateful Eight? And like I said, not
Yeah,
negative.
yeah.
Like we're not bashing the
No, no,
movie, but I'm
no.
just
And I'm
curious. Like
I'm I'm
it's a
always
fun
curious,
combo.
yeah, because
Yeah,
I found people who agree, like, and who love it as much as I do, and people like you who like still really like it and really enjoy it and have no problem watching it and like click with a lot of things about it,
yep.
but like just don't put it in that upper echelon of Tarantino, and that's fine. I totally get it.
This will be the last thing I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna move on to my number 2. This would be one of those
Yeah.
movies where this is just for hear me out for a second. If this was 100% on
Mhm.
Rotten Tomatoes and the average rating was a 6, I wouldn't be surprised. Where it's like no one says anything negative, but also no one's high on it. You know what I mean? Like, but the average is a 6,
Yeah,
but you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised because like you really
yeah.
have nothing to say negative about the movie, but also it might not be the
Well,
favorite. It's
I can imagine a lot of the reviews being like, "Man, all the performances are amazing, and the writing, is really good. But like, God damn it, it's 3 hours long, and it
yeah,
feels like 3 hours, and it just
exactly. That's it.
and it just takes forever to get there. And it's like, I don't care though, because I'm along for the ride. I from the opening carriage ride, I'm along for that ride all the way to the haberdashery, and where it ends up, with a bloody mess of a haberdashery and everything in shambles and tatters, and a woman hanging from the ceiling, and a guy with his nuts shot off, and they're pretty much both gonna die, and it's just going to be a mass. Somebody's going to find this massacre, a week later when they pull up to the haberdashery, and be like, "What the hell happened here?" Like, yeah, all that stuff is just it just works for me.
All right, final question before I move on to my number 2. Surf Ninjas or Hateful Eight? Go.
Hateful Eight, Hateful Eight,
Boom. Boom. All right, and for my
Hateful
number
Eight,
2.
Hateful Eight.
All right, I'm gonna get a beer. I was trying to do a nice little quick. I'm gonna get
Yeah,
my
you're
beer real
fine.
quick. Yeah.
No, and
But
I figured out what your two. I know what your two and one are. I just don't know what order they're in. But
yeah, yeah.
we'll find out in a
So
second. So, yeah,
like I said, that's why I let you go first because yours is more interesting. Mine
sure.
mine is legit. Like it's not like the film bro.
No, no, no,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I believe you. I
yeah,
believe
yeah.
you. Yeah, yeah.
But
No,
like but
and a lot of
the
people,
reason
it's
I
still
went
like,
show
well,
wise,
and
I let you go
it's
first
the
because
cliche. I feel like it's unfortunate that the cliche thing is to
It's
be like,
considered cliche.
Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs or whatever is my favorite Tarantino movie. It like feels cliche, but like, why should it be cliche? If it's great, it's great.
Yeah,
Like, what's the
exactly.
problem with that?
Exactly.
Like, what's the problem with that?
And so, with that said, I want to have the caveat here of my number two is the movie that I watched the furthest away of the two. Like my number one is the one that I watched most recently, based on when you asked
Mm,
me. Like you know what I mean? It's one of those where
for sure.
when you
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you eventually see my reveal of my aforementioned top 100 favorite movies list, they are going to be tied at the hips, but the order might change depending on when you hear about the list. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
when you think of Henry Confidential, Henry Sanchez on the internet, you think of these two
Hmm.
movies. You don't question it, and that's fine. But you genuinely understand and you genuinely know why. So today, at the end of 2021, where I'm finalize my list going into my reveal of my top
Right.
100. So the order is as it is today, but it's confident, but also might switch tomorrow. But with that said, as of today, my number two is my former number one for the longest, Reservoir Dogs. And the
Hmm.
reason why Reservoir Dogs is my number two is because I love this movie. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Reservoir Dogs is
Yeah.
one of those movies, and I know this sounds stupid, and if like for those out there that don't play trivia and don't understand the concept of like not studying but just knowing something,
Hmm.
there's a game on, I don't know if it's on Android, but it's definitely on iOS, called Popcorn Trivia, and it has a bunch of movies. They stopped updating in
Right.
2017, and it
Right.
broke my heart. But Reservoir Dogs is one of two movies that I got a perfect score on and didn't like study. I just knew, you know what I mean? But like, there's a lot of like
Yeah.
stupid
Yeah.
questions in there. So the fact that I got a perfect score on it, it's just one of those where it's like, yo, this is, I know the stupid things. You know what I mean? It's one of those where it's like,
You might really know this movie.
yeah.
Yeah. Like
And it,
inside
and
and
and,
out.
it, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that was one of the
Yeah.
trigger moments where I'm like, this is my movie. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you know,
Hmm.
my number one, Pulp Fiction, is going to be one of those where I have little things that like might, depending on the day, I might not be as happy. This one's a perfect movie for me, but sometimes Pulp Fiction's more fun. So Reservoir Dogs, the reason I
Hmm.
love this movie is you start off is you don't know who is your through line for about half the movie. You got
Right.
this gang.
Who's going to be
And
your focus? Yeah.
exactly, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's an interesting tactic because you think of it like an Ocean's 11 type, where it's like, even in Ocean's 11, you got George Clooney, you got Brad Pitt, like one of these two are the guys. You know what I mean? You don't know
Mm.
really who. Probably George Clooney, but Brad Pitt, he might be the guy who's recruiting people. So you have like the two. In this one, you have all of them. You have obviously Mr. Pink and Mr. White in the warehouse. But when you think of all the subsiding scenes and like Mr. Orange going through his stuff,
Well,
like
and Harvey Keitel is top billed, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the focus. He's just the
exactly,
biggest name coming into the movie. And also, the fact that the movie opens actually with Tarantino doing a monologue,
yeah,
and you
that
don't know, is he going to be the focus of the movie, like in his
exactly.
own movie, like, and he's doing the one doing all the talking in the opening scene, and but then again, then it switches to White, then it switches to Pink at the table doing his tips monologue, so like you don't know who's going to be, and Michael Madsen's just sitting back being cool. You're like, oh, are we going to follow that quiet cool guy back there? Like, you don't know who you're going to follow, like who's going to be the focus.
And speaking of that diner scene, it's one of those where it is. First of all, one of my like main things in movies is how does it suck you in the beginning, because you need
Hmm.
to have that intrigue from the beginning. There's a lot of movies that I genuinely love and like respect, but like I'm not like invested until about 15-20 minutes in, because just the narrative is, and the filmmaking is so patient, which most times that's fine, but in terms of like favorites, I want to be like invested and like eyes glued to the screen in the first 5 seconds. And talking about Like a Virgin in the first 5 seconds of this movie, like hearing just the perspective of like them debating,
Hmm.
is it having sex for the first time, or is it having a big old cock? You know what I mean? Because you
Yeah,
haven't been
right.
fucked like that for so long. And it's one of those where it's like that. There's something about the writing of like people think like that. Like people talk about Tarantino all the time, where it's like it's very dialogue heavy. But when you hear his dialogue, you actually hear the dialogue from these characters as people, not as characters.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And that this is a diner scene where if you're a fly in the wall and you heard this diner, like this weird conversation is something you might hear in public. You know what I mean? And then you
Hmm.
have the thing with Mr. White. Wong. Wong, and then Madison getting mad at him, and then Mr. White, he's like, he's like, shoot them. And then he's like, if you shoot me, if you shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologize. And sure, you've heard that a
You're
plain
gonna
time
wake
in
up and
this day. But there's
apologize.
something about
I love
these
his delivery.
characters, like they're just going back and forth, and then later, once you get the flashback of how they're getting the colors and how they're all trying to like distinguish of like who's what, and like at that point, Mr. Pink is like essentially one of the perennial characters in the entire movie. But in that flashback, he's like, I don't want to be that. It's Mr. Pussy, and like they're building him up to be like that. But at the end of the day, he's technically the only guy who technically wins. You know what I mean? There's so much going on with this movie, and like you were talking about earlier with Mr. Blonde being like crazy and psychopathic, but like kind of likable. You know what I mean? It's like there's so much going on in this movie that it's like,
But then you see him wrestling around with Chris Penn in like
yeah,
Joe's office, and they're just
Toothpick
being
Vic.
silly and
He's a
goofy.
guy.
And
He
yeah,
just got out of
and
prison.
he's just Penn's friend, and it's like, yeah. But then you see him doing these horrific things later, and you're like, that's the same guy. Like,
Yeah,
okay, well, I mean, I guess it's the same guy depending on when you catch him. What's
exactly.
going on in his
And
life.
and as crazy as that sound is,
Yeah.
that's real. Like that's how people are. You know what I mean? Like people can
Mhm.
turn it on like that if they really need to. And it's like the it's so subtle. But like the line that Madsen says, like, are you gonna bark all day, little doggy, or are you gonna bite? Excuse me, you hear me? You heard me. You gonna bark all day,
Mhm.
little doggy, or you gonna bite? Like there's no hesitation. He's like, I'm saying
Yeah.
this. I'm saying, you know what I mean? Because when it comes to like competing egos and like people like like the dick
Mhm.
measure, where it's like that's just there's just something about like how Tarantino writes these characters, and like you said, first major movie, like he did the whatever, My Best Friend's Wedding or whatever. It's not like serious, it's more of like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
like
No,
a, like a student film.
he
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
even count that as his first movie.
But the
Yeah,
fact that
yeah.
like
Like
this is his first like real feature length movie, and it's arguably like better than most people's best movie, that's
hmm
amazing. And that's something
yeah.
like I said, the dialogue, even the little flashback scene when you actually have the heist, you don't actually have the heist, but you have the running in
You
the
don't see
street. Like
it.
it's tense
You just
though,
see
you know what
like
I
the
mean?
aftermath. Yeah,
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 and
yeah.
it's tense. And then you have the scene, when like you said, when he shoots the lady in the car. Like there's moments that just great directing. It's so simple and so cheap, but it's just so much fun. And there's even like little moments of like when Tim Roth's character is talking about the doing the joke scene, which is great directing, and how he's doing both and back and forth, and like how you're able to like really have great pacing for that. But like little moments of like it just shows Tarantino from day one being a nerd. He's like he looks like the Thing, and it's like the fact that he's bringing up a comic character in the early
Yeah, yeah,
90s,
yeah.
like that's something that's just like, oh yeah, this guy's a nerd. And it shows later how much he loves filmmaking. Like Reservoir
Mhm.
Dogs is one of those movies I can quote it all day long. It's so much fun. It is shorter, so it's not like pulling teeth to rewatch. And it's not as bad in terms of like a first film as you would see in like other people where it's like, oh, that's a little raw. Like
Mhm.
no, it's if you blindly watch this for the first time, you would never guess in a million years this was a director's first film. It might be a
This
lower, which is
could be a
fine.
movie.
Yeah,
It could be a movie he made in the middle of his run in
exactly.
like 2000. I mean, it could be his third or fourth movie.
And
I
there's
mean,
also
he
nothing
could do
about the
that
movie that
movie.
makes it feel 90s too, which is kind of important because it's a perennial 90s
No,
movies,
no.
but it doesn't feel dated. And like that, I think that's
Well,
another
no,
good thing
because
about
it's
Tarantino.
just modern. They're not using a bunch of tech in the movie that like dates it. They're
It's not
listening to
hackers.
oldies on they're listening on the oldies anyways on the radio, the Super
Yep.
70s thing, which you could do now. You could have some guy on the radio doing
Yep.
Super 70s now. And people talking about it. Hey, did you hear the dude doing the 70s on the radio? Like you could talk about that now. It doesn't really date anything because they're listening to oldies in the movie, so you don't know. Like it feels timeless because
And
it's
they're
just
wearing
this little
suits, so the
bubble.
clothing doesn't feel
Yeah.
dated. Yeah, it's
No,
it's
no, no. They're
so
wearing little
perfect.
suits. Yeah, there's nothing that's dated. Yeah, it just works. And yeah, every character beat, every character interaction, everybody theorizing about everything and undercutting everything. I don't know. I'm not the rat. I'm pretty sure you're not a fucking rat. You just shut up the whole place.
One
I
of
don't
my
know
one of
about
my
you.
other
I don't
favorite
know about that
lines.
guy.
He's like, "How do I know you're not
Yeah.
the fucking rat?" He's like, "Exactly. Now you're
Mhm.
thinking." And it's like there's little things
Now
like
you're
that. And
thinking,
yeah,
am I the only one that's a fucking professional around here? Shit like that. Like,
there's
he just, and then Chris Penn comes in and he's just like, "There's no fucking rat. There is no
and
rat."
then the fact
I'm
that
like,
like he's a badass in the movie. He's like, "Quit show my daddy,"
yeah,
and he's like he's like when he's really a daddy's
yeah.
boy. I don't. Oh, okay, I will
Quit,
recant a little
quit,
bit. His
quit pointing that
tracksuit.
gun at my dad.
Yeah, his
Like that.
tracksuit is a little dated, but like it's only in like 10 seconds of
Yeah.
the movie, so it's not a big deal. But the
Yeah,
rest
but
of
at
the
the same time, if you watch something like The Sopranos, like sleazy mob guys sometimes wear those tracksuits
Just because,
anyways,
yeah.
and like just to be because they're
If you
douchey,
watch
like
Hawkeye, you
they're
have literally the tracksuit gang. Like that's kind of
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
thing.
I
Like
mean,
it's a mindset.
it's it's one of those mindsets where these guys think they can pull it off, so they just wear it anyway. So it doesn't necessarily date it because he's the only one wearing it, and you could just think he's a douchey guy who likes
Yeah.
tracksuits. Like it's
Bracelets and
whatever.
tracksuits, like and like you look like you're about to
Yeah,
rip off your
yeah,
pants and go into a basketball game for the
yeah.
Chicago Bulls in the '90s.
Yeah, 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 right.
So Reservoir Dogs, that is the
Yeah.
movie that it's been like that from day one. Like I said, this is honestly, it was set in stone. Like obviously you can do the math. My number one, Pulp Fiction, but it's like
Hmm.
Reservoir Dogs for the longest was my number one. You know what I mean? But like on when I
Hmm.
really went down to the heart, which one do I talk about more? Just naturally, not like forcefully, but
Hmm.
naturally. You know, Pulp Fiction took it over, but Reservoir Dog, it's up there for me. I love the movie so much, and like honestly, I love when people love this movie as much as I do, and that means a lot to me. That's the
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
about
yeah.
film, where it's like
No,
you
I
can
mean,
get to it.
I rewatched it like 3 days ago, and it played just as well 3 days ago than when I first saw it. For the very first
Yeah.
time, and I was discovering everything. Like I got wrapped up in it. I found myself quoting the lines along with the characters when they would pop up. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And getting wrapped up in their back and forth. Even just the little things I had never I've forgotten about, like when the after the cop or after Tim Roth shoots Mr. Blonde, and then just the little thing where the cop looks at him and goes, how do I look? And the guy, and Tim Roth just goes, I'm fucking dying over here. Who cares how you fucking look? I'm fucking dying. Like it's just like where was that come from? It's just funny. Like and again, those lighthearted moments amidst this bloody violence.
Yeah.
There's just blood everywhere. There's carnage all over this thing. Like it's just yeah, it works. All those levity moments, like it just everything that builds up. It's so much. And by the way, Sam Jackson could have been that dude that Tim Roth is doing the story to, and it would have come full circle with Sam Jackson being in like almost all of his movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't. It didn't happen, unfortunately. But it could
Yeah.
have been. He auditioned for it. He didn't get it. Oddly enough, I don't know why.
Eventually,
Why not?
Tarantino learned his lesson. So
Yeah, right.
what
Of
is
course, number one
your
is full. Oh, well, my
no?
number
We'll
one.
go to your
Okay.
number one
Well,
first. More interesting.
I mean, yeah, and if you've done the math on my end, you know that my number one is Django Unchained, and I've got my original Django shirt, Franco Nero,
Of course, it's
old
with a
school
D.
Django.
I know.
Yeah, yeah, and again,
Or the D
if
is
you
silent. That's what
know
it is. My bad.
if you know who that is, which I did going into the movie because I was on my Western kick at the time with my Eastwood movies, and I bought the Blu-ray of Django, the original Django, and all that kind of stuff. And he shows up in the movie, and I was like, it's Django. No, like the real Django. Like he's right there. And he goes like, yes, the D is silent. Yes, I know. I'm like, yes, you know, because you're Franco Nero and you're awesome. Like, I was just, and the fact that that opening song, the Django, Django, that's the song from the original too, and
That's
he uses
cool.
the same opening. So yeah, it's the original song from the '60s. But yeah, like this one, and it's kind of been the culmination of my love over the last 10 years that I've come to have for westerns, particularly gritty westerns.
Yeah.
I don't like John Wayne westerns, like slow bullshit, like I'm just gonna punch you in the face and slide you across the bar westerns. I mean, like spaghetti westerns, the Italian westerns, Eastwood stuff, where like they're gonna shoot you in the face and they're gonna show you the blood, and they're gonna call each other crazy insults and nutty plots and bounty hunters and all kinds of violent shit. Like this is Tarantino's love letter to all of that stuff as well. In addition to his love letter for these actors and setting up these worlds. And again, it's another thing where the world that he sets up in Django Unchained is one that I just want to sit in for a while and explore all the different aspects of it. The this King Schultz character who's so fascinating that he goes around this dentist. You think he's a dentist,
I've
with a
cracked
little
dentistry
carriage
in
with a
years.
tooth on top flopping around, just silly shit. And like, you know, the fact that it's again set kind of during, slavery, kind of during, still around the Civil War area, much like Hateful Eight, kind of still in this era and living in this world. But you've got this King Schultz character who's past all that, who doesn't see all that, who's ashamed of that kind of stuff, who doesn't like seeing it. he's a good guy at heart, but he's also kind of a ruthless killer. And just yeah, this crazy world he sets up with this Mandingo fighting and guys like Calvin Candy and Big Daddy, like this exaggerated, you know, Tarantino world with that hint of realism. You know, it's still somewhat grounded in history, but he's kind of altered it a little bit. This alternate version of history that he always puts in his movies, and the
Yeah.
way he kind of sets things up. Like same with Inglorious Bastards, these kind of alternate versions of things. But again, just all the dynamics between all these different characters just work, and it's just a great western in itself, and it's just such a great buddy story, and I just click with the energy of the movie. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes that feels like an hour, man. This movie just flies, man. Like this movie just, I can't believe when we're at the end, when we get to the end, like it clicks and
I will say
clicks and
there's two
clicks in
endings,
everything we
but they're
encounter.
both really satisfying. You know what I mean?
Yes, because there's the sort of ending, well, and it's
The
funny because
candy
some people.
climax.
Yes, and then the following climax where Django goes back and
So it's
takes
kind of
out
two,
Candyland.
but
Yeah,
they're both really
yes, kind of
satisfying
two,
for their own arc.
but they're still good because some people check out once King Schultz is out of the movie. But I just argue that King Schultz has stepped aside for Django to kind of claim his movie and his arc, and finish off his story and be his own hero. Not being literally behind King Schultz the whole movie. He has to go get his wife himself. He's got to. Schultz has helped him as far as he can go, and he's gotten him there. And now Django has to take over and be the hero. And that's why. And you get the great. If you're in it for the violence, you get all the crazy violence at the end, the shootouts, the dudes
Nuts and
getting
blowing them away. Yeah.
exploded with bloods. Guys getting hit over and over again with these bullets and balloons of blood flying all over the place. And it's got everything you could want as far as that goes, but it's also got the smart just interactions with everybody and the fun stuff. I just this movie is just so goddamn entertaining. It's kind of like for me with Martin Scorsese and The Wolf of Wall Street, how like
Okay.
that's my number one for Martin Scorsese just because it's so damn entertaining
Yeah.
from start to finish. I just dig everything about the vibe of this movie, and just every scene just clicks and has firepower to it for me, and it just works. And much like how Hateful Eight works in that I get sucked into that world and the vibe of the slow burn. This one is the vibe of the pace that it sets and that it keeps that pace, and the
Firecracker.
explosiveness of this movie works in the same way that the low key tension of Hateful Eight works for me, and that they're two polar opposite things. They're both kind of westerns. They're both kind of set in the same world, but like they're two different perspectives, kind of on these same two different takes on how you could approach these stories and follow these characters. And Django just slightly edges it out. But any given day, I could put Hateful Eight
I was
above
just about to
Django.
ask
How
that.
I'm feeling,
Is
you know
there
what
a
I mean? I really
universe
could.
where they could flip?
There is a universe, and much like you with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, on any given year, any given day, how I'm feeling, Hateful Eight could take that number one spot. It really could. And even down the line when I'm just, a little older, and I just want more, slower character
Yeah.
driven stuff, like Hateful Eight could easily take that over for me. Yeah, definitely. But Django's number one
Yeah.
with a
So,
bullet.
like I said, I love Django. So that's how I feel about
Mm-hmm.
my number one, Pulp Fiction, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I
Well, and
had
again,
one.
like you said, you feel like it's cliche, but like, why should it be?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, who cares? The Pulp Fiction is Pulp Fiction. There's
Yeah.
a reason why all these movies in the '90s are compared to Pulp Fiction. There's a reason why there's a million ripoffs of Pulp Fiction. There's a reason why there's filmmakers that saw this movie and wanted to be filmmakers because of Pulp Fiction.
I feel like there's three movies in history, or at least in recent history, quote unquote, because I'm talking about the
Hmm.
'80s technically,
Yeah, yeah.
of like, ripoffs galore.
Hmm.
Die Hard,
Sure.
The Matrix, Pulp Fiction. When you think of
Yes.
movies that like, you know what I mean? So it kind of brings down the legacy of those movies because of what comes and pretends to be
Hmm.
aftermath. But when you really sit back and watch
Sure.
the movies, it's the Pulp Fiction of Pulp Fiction or the Die Hard of Die Hard, The Matrix, for a reason. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And honestly, taking outside opinions and word of mouth aside, my only issues with the movie is the Butch storyline. It's not even an issue. It's just depending on my mood that day when I watch it, which is why
If you get
it
into it that much,
which is why it could
yeah.
technically flip with Reservoir Dogs depending on the day. Like I
Hmm.
don't hate the Butch storyline. there's just something about it on a certain day that I might not be in the mood for a sub
Hmm.
romance slash. You know what I mean? It's literally, it's not even a negative. It's just there's nothing about Reservoir Dog that takes me out of it, but the highs of Pulp
Hmm.
Fiction are fucking high. So if I'm
Well, that's what I'm
splitting
saying. The
hairs, yeah,
highs are so high that like even the somewhat 15-minute lull with
exactly.
Bruce Will with Butch and Fabiana in the motel room,
I have a little
like,
pot.
and
Oh,
even
you
that
want a
is,
little pot? No, I'll put you in
yeah,
the pot. Like little
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that, but they're
no, no, no,
character
yeah, no,
building.
no.
It builds a
But
relationship, but yeah,
you also know where it's going, and then the highs of that storyline are crazy batshit nuts, that are so high that it's like you know
exactly.
where it's
So
going.
it's
You go, okay, but I just got to push through because all the shit coming after it is nuts, and it's great. You know what I mean? Like all everything. So
That's what I'm
if
saying.
you
So if you're
push through it,
splitting it
it's
hairs, you
awesome.
you have an hour and 40-minute movie and you have a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, but the 2 hour 20-minute movie has about 15 20-minute that like aren't as good as the
Hmm.
rest. If you're splitting hairs, depending on the day, like I feel like that's a fair judgment. But
Hmm.
with that said, the highs of Pulp Fiction. Oh my god, dude! Like Zed's dead.
Hmm.
Which is ironic that it's from the Butch storyline, but Zed's dead.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
line that randomly, just for no reason, Zed's dead, baby. Who's Zed? Zed's dead, baby.
That's that,
Dead,
baby.
dead. Yeah,
It
it's
ain't
just
it ain't a,
it's
it ain't a bike, baby. It's a chopper.
yeah, exactly. You know
Right?
what I mean? And obviously, Royale with cheese. Like you said, Ezekiel 25:17. Like there's so much things with that movie where it's pop culture. You know what I mean? It transcends Tarantino. It's
Hmm.
just in the universe. So it's honestly, I know it's gonna sound crazy because it's not, but it's one of those things where it's become underrated because people think of it as just so overrated that it's like, oh, it's not as good. Like, no, no, chill out.
But it's not overrated.
Yeah,
It's rated. It's rated
exactly. Which
exactly as high as it
ironically
needs to be.
makes it low key
Yeah, yeah.
underrated because now they're starting. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
kind
It's
of.
a weird dynamic that you have with this
It's
movie, and
up,
it's like,
it's down, it's up, it's down. It's weird. Yeah, the
like
way the
honestly, the
perception of the
only
movie. But
negative about this movie that you will consistently hear, it's like it's not as good as I heard about. Is it bad? No, it's actually really great. So what do you mean? Well, but people are
what do
saying
you
it's
mean it's
number one.
bad?
Yeah, people are saying it's the number one movie of all time. Where would you put it? Oh, number three. Like, wait, what? What's the argument here? You know what I mean? It's one of those where it's like it's so you know what I mean. It's so tough to talk about this
Hmm.
movie in like a negative light because you really can't. Like, there's really no flaw. Everything has a purpose, and it's so much fun. And like you said, like you talked about multiple times earlier, like the stabbing scene with the adrenaline shot, the fact that like Tarantino for his second movie had the patience to really draw out that scene and build up that tension, putting the
Hmm.
camera back and forth, sweat dripping from
Hmm.
every character. John Travolta looking gross in that scene. Uma
Oh
Thurman
yeah.
looking gross in that scene, as a
Well,
beautiful
sitting
woman.
and she sits up and she's got a needle stick still stuck
Yeah,
in her
it
and
just
she's got the
feels
makeup pouring down
yeah
her face and she's wet and she's just sticky and everything feels
gross.
gross and they're sitting in that drive of the car where they're
They're
both
just
looking gross and
ugh,
haggard and just like they've been through hell and they both have been through hell, whether it's
literally
psychological or physical, literally, like, and
yes.
just have they have that moment where it's like, if he finds out about this,
You'd be
I'm
you,
fucking
and then and
dead.
then and then
Yeah.
she was like, I would be
She
in
says,
just as much
yeah.
trouble as you. He's like, I seriously doubt
No,
that.
yeah, I see, doubt that.
I would fucking
And
die.
you want to,
You might get a smack. Like, trust
but
me,
then,
it's not the
but
same.
then she ends it with, "You want to hear the joke?
Yep.
Like, and it's not funny. Promise you won't laugh. Okay, I promise I won't laugh.
He's like, I'm not
And
worried
it's
about that. You won't laugh.
not right with that. And the tomato just kind of is like, huh,
Catch
all
up.
right,
Catch up.
just walking, yeah,
And it's
uh,
one of those where it's
huh.
like, damn, I feel like shit, and that actually was kind of funny. You know what I mean? It's you can tell in
Yeah,
his
right
eyes.
in the moment. Yeah, yeah,
I physically can't laugh, but I kind of wanna, and
yeah,
that's one of those things where,
yeah, right.
and honestly, I know it sounds crude saying it, but like the scene where he's in the mirror, he's like, you're gonna go home, you're gonna jerk off, and it's like, but you built up
Yeah.
that chemistry, that connection,
Mhm.
and I mean, she even says, he's like, you ever have that moment where you can just sit in silence for 5 minutes, just shut the fuck up, and he's like, I don't know if we're there yet, you know what I mean? It's like trust me,
Yeah.
we are. Like there's some things
Mhm.
like even like like I keep hinting
Yeah.
at my top 100. Like I have a lot of favorite movies like romance where it's like you have that instant connection. Vincent and Mia have a weird instant connection where it's just like sometimes
Mhm.
chemistry just sparks. And like honestly, it really kills me that Uma Thurman and John Travolta. Fact check me in the comments, guys, but I don't know if they've ever done another movie together, and if they have, or what? Be Cool. No, it was something like Nothing Good. But anyway, they've never
Yeah,
done
yeah, yeah.
anything like worth noting. So the fact that they haven't, and that like this is one of the most popular movies of all time, like that's a crazy thing to think about. And even John Travolta and Sam Jackson, the fact that they never did, or yeah, because for a second, I've been drinking, so don't judge me, guys. But for a second, I was thinking of taking a Pelham
Mhm.
1, 2, 3. I'm like, or no, yeah, and I was like, oh, John Travolta and Sam. No,
That's
that was
Denzel.
Denzel. But that's not
Yeah,
the point. But
yeah.
the point, you know what I mean? There's so much things where it's like their
Oh yeah.
chemistry is so great that you would assume they've done multiple things they haven't. Sometimes lightning's in a bottle, and it's Pulp Fiction, guys. So if for some
Mhm.
reason maybe you're 21 years old, and at this point you're like, oh, I've heard about it too much, or Film Bros, or whatever. Same thing like people diss with Fight Club. Watch the movie again and actually judge it based on the film, and I promise you, it lives up to the hype. Like I asked Austin earlier, when you
Yeah.
watch this movie, you said you relate to it, which is fair, but did it live up to the hype? Yes. Regardless of
Yes.
where it is in
Yes.
the rankings, yes, because
No,
it is.
and again,
Oh my god.
I described it. It wasn't a movie. It took me on this journey where I didn't know where the hell it was going. I had out of context knowledge of certain things, you know what I mean? But I didn't know how they connected. I didn't know where they were going. I didn't know, this scene from that scene from that scene. And again, a week two later, I wanted to watch it again, to put the pieces back together again and see it in a whole nother light and dig into everything about it. Yeah, it's like when people say, oh, Jaws is my favorite Spielberg movie, and like, what? That's cliche. Well, everybody loves Jaws. Well, yeah, everybody loves fucking Jaws because it's Jaws and it's awesome, and it's amazing. Like, so what if it's Jaws? Because Jaws is awesome. Like, oh, you love
Guess
Die
what?
Hard?
Two
Well, I
plus
get you
two
fucking
also
Die Hard.
equals
But
four.
like,
That doesn't make it
yeah, but
overrated.
like, well, yeah, because Die Hard's the best version of Die Hard we've ever had, and there's been a million ripoffs of Die Hard. It's Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a train, Die Hard on a boat. Like there's the reason they all get compared to Die Hard because Die Hard's that good and that perfect. It's these things of like, yeah, so what if Pulp Fiction is a cliche answer of what's your favorite Tarantino movie and why every time it comes up on tournament fights it makes the top 8? Well, it's because it's that fucking great. It's because Pulp Fiction is that good, and like it's a movie you see it and you immediately want to go watch it again.
I,
Like
will- I will I will
that's
I
what it
will
is.
I will tease this. My initial
Yeah.
list that I sent Jordan did not have
Mm-hmm.
Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs on it, and then I amended it and was
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I want to change some things up. Ironically, not because of those, because something else added on
Mm-hmm.
there that I want to add on there. And as I did, I was like, I gotta stay true to myself. If it wins, it wins. Because guess what? It's so high that if it becomes my new number
Well, and
one,
Pulp Fiction,
that's
I will
fine with me.
say it's a favorite on tournament fights.
Which
If
is
it
which is
it
the
gets
only
included,
reason why I
it
took it
makes it a
off.
long way.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
only reason I took it off is because I just want to give some
yeah.
new life. But then I was like, it's
Mhm.
so high, I got to stay true to
But at the
myself.
same time, if it is, it is.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's like I was
If
perfectly
there was
fine with
someone in the community,
Roger Rabbit coming out on top, and because I've seen Roger Rabbit 9,000 times, that like it's
exactly,
fine. I fucking love Roger Rabbit. Like I'm
exactly. If
perfectly
there's
happy with
someone in
that.
the community that has Pulp Fiction as their quote unquote new number one, it would be
Hmm.
me. You know what I mean? Like there's no argument. Like
Hmm.
yes, like honestly, people will be surprised to
Yeah.
hear that it's not my number one. Spoiler alert, it's not.
Hmm.
It might be higher up, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like it's not my number one. So, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's fine. Like, so like that's how
Hmm.
much I love this movie. So, uh give me a recap of your top 9 and I'm going to give a recap of mine and then I did this behind the scenes. I'm going to give you, top 10 style what our combined top 9 would be and I'm curious to see what your thoughts on it. So do yours individually,
Okay.
mine individually and then I'm going to give you what I assume is our combined 9.
Okay, so my actual top 9 is number 9, Once Upon a Time in the West, or Hollywood. Excuse me, I've got
That's a
westerns on the
different
brain.
movie.
Once Upon a Time in the West. Yeah, that's a way different movie. That's a different movie. But Ennio Morricone, Hateful Eight, there's a connection. I don't know. Anyways, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Excuse me. Number 8 is Death Proof. Number 7, Inglourious Bastards. Number 6 is Reservoir Dogs. Number 5 is the Kill Bill Saga. I'll just call it the Kill Bill 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Number 4 is Jackie Brown. Number 3 is Pulp Fiction. Number 2, Hateful Eight, and number 1, Django Unchained.
And number 9 is The Hateful Eight. Number 8 is Death Proof. Number 7 is Inglourious Bastards. Number 6 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Number 5 is Jackie Brown. Number 4 is Django Unchained. Number 4 is Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 combined. Whole Bloody Affair, however you want to describe it. Number 2 is Reservoir Dogs. And as of today, number 1 is Pulp Fiction. So,
Mhm.
I did a little, I tried my best to like be legit of how it
Like a
averages
rope a
out.
nose style.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a couple of them were obvious because we had
Yeah, yeah.
some very similar or almost the same for a few of them. Glorious Bastards, we both had number 7. Jackie Brown, we both had 4-ish, 5-ish. You
Let's
know what
just
I
put
mean?
it
Like
this
there were
way:
some
there are
that are
two
similar to that.
movies that are mid tier that are
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to swallow because they are high for one of us.
Hmm.
So that's why I word it
Hmm.
that way, where I'm like, I tried my best to
Right.
be. So
Hmm.
with that said, let's rank stuff. Henry Confidential and Austin Pez is top 9 Tarantino movies are. Number 9, Death Proof.
Death
Number
Proof,
8,
yes.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Number
Hmm.
7, literally, Inglourious Bastards.
Literally, Inglourious Bastards. Yeah.
Number 6, The Hateful Eight.
Hmm.
Number 5, though, Reservoir Dogs. So those are the two I was
Hmm.
talking about where I'm like, it hurts, but when
Right.
you think about each
Hmm.
other's list, it balances out. Number 4,
Sure.
Jackie Brown.
Sure, sure. Hmm.
Number 3, Kill Bills. Multiple
Kill
Bills.
Bill's Bills.
Number 2,
Let's use Django. It's got to be Django, right?
Django. And then number 1, Pulp
Number
Fiction.
one's
Just
Pulp
because of the
Fiction.
1-3
Yeah.
beats out 1-4. That's literally how
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So,
And well, again, and if I'd seen Pulp Fiction as much as the sheer amount of times I've watched Django and Hateful Eight, like in the
maybe,
background,
yeah.
again, it could overtake that 1 or 2 slot. It only takes that 3 slot because of the sheer amount of times, which it
Exactly.
factors in for me personally and the way I rank things. That's literally all it is.
And
So
like
yeah.
I said, for my top 1, 2, and 3, technically 1, 2, and 3, 4, if you count Kill Bill 1 and
Mm,
2. Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, no, hands down, those have always been the 1, 2. There's never been a debate. But
mm,
like Kill Bill, like I said, that was the first Tarantino movie I'd ever seen. And it's one of those where it's got the action, it's got the heart. Like I said, when BB comes in,
mm,
I cry. There's tense moments. There's a horror scene technically with the buck. You know what I mean? There's so much going on with this movie that like it's just everything. So those have been my 1, 2, 3 from the day that I die. So similar to what you're talking about with
mm,
your Django, Hateful Eight, and Pulp Fiction, where it's like any given Sunday, shout out Al Pacino, any
mm.
given Sunday, and technically Jamie Foxx, any given Sunday, it could, you know what I mean? There could
Shuffle
be
a
a
little
rotate.
bit,
Yeah.
a
So
little bit.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like for for Django Unchained, for Quentin Tarantino, obviously you guys watching, please comment below your 8, or if you want to be weirdos and separate Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. No, I'm just kidding. Do it how you guys want to do it. If you guys genuinely hate Kill Bill Volume 2 and you want to separate them, that's fine.
I
Comment
put Kill
below.
Bill Volume 2 above Kill Bill Volume 1 personally, but
Ooh,
that's just
shots fired.
yeah,
So
yeah.
comment below your Tarantino rankings, whether it's 9 or 10, depending on how you view things. Let us know where you disagree with us. But here's an even more fun one. If you don't have a ranking, but you have genuinely one hot take disagreeing with one of us or both of us, comment that below. Like, hey, you're crazy having Hateful Eight at number 2, or yo, you're crazy having Inglourious Bastards at number 7, guys. You know what I mean? Comment below.
Or I'm crazy for having Once Upon a Time in Hollywood last on my list, even though I
Exactly.
said multiple times it doesn't mean I dislike it, but having it
Exactly.
last, you can call me an idiot for having it last. That's
Or
fine.
both of us having Jackie Brown as high as we do. Like, let us know what your thoughts are in the comments, because Tarantino's one of those where
Maybe somebody out there has Death Proof at number 2 or 3. Maybe they love Death Proof.
yes,
Like I mean,
I love
it
how you
could
didn't
be.
say
I mean, we
1,
both
but
know what it is. Yeah,
you're
I
like,
don't think anybody on the planet really has that
no,
movie at number 1. I
no,
can't imagine that. But maybe somebody has it at like 2 or 3. Maybe somebody really clicks with it. Maybe there's.
maybe.
Hey, I will say this. Maybe there's a young lady out there who really connects with all the ladies in those movies
It's
and
true.
loves the fact that he wrote for a movie about ladies and strong, these just group of females. You know what I mean? Maybe they really click with that. Having said that, I still don't think there's a single person on the planet that has Death Proof at number 1. I will stand by that. Prove me wrong.
I don't
On
either.
that
Hold on,
one.
hold on.
So, yeah.
Last thing. Comment below the ranking of the usage of feet in all of Tarantino movies, because
Right.
you got the dirty Margot Robbie and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
You
You have
got Wiggle
the
the
black and
Toes,
white
Wiggle the Toe,
version,
Wiggle,
the throwback
Wiggle the
in
Big
Death
Toe.
Proof with
Yeah.
Rosario Dawson, and then you have
Wiggle
Kill
your
Bill,
toe,
where she
wiggle
can't
your,
even move her
wiggle
foot.
your bigger toe.
Yeah,
Yeah, what do you
exactly.
think?
So
So,
there's a various
yeah.
options there. So there's so much that you could talk about with
Mm,
Tarantino, and that's why I have no shame with admitting. I mean, obviously we're only 2 episodes in, but like this is clearly the longer one because you could talk about Tarantino for hours, and I have no shame. Like obviously there's fun fact behind the
yeah.
scenes. There are two things where I legitimately have to cut out because of just behind the scenes stuff. But like I already know this is gonna be a long one, and I have no shame. Tarantino. If you're a Tarantino fan, you clicked on this video, you watched it to watch it this long, and I am happy to see you here. So with that said. My name is Henry Confidential. You are.
Austin Pezzel.
And this is where we come to rank stuff. Quentin Tarantino, episode 2. We are out. Cheers, guys.